This is the Budget and Finance Committee for the Recreation Centers of Sun City West. Today is October the 24th. It's 9 a.m. and I wish to call this meeting to order. If we could stand and pledge allegiance to the flag. We have a very aggressive agenda today, and we're going to be talking about some very important issues, and hopefully we'll be able to come up with some recommendations today. The first thing I'd like to do is to offer the minutes of October the 10th. Does anyone have any changes or comments on it? And if not, we'll pass them forward. Thank you. Our first item on the agenda today is item 3.01, and it is the report or the results of our independent audit by CLA, our independent auditor. I want to offer some comments initially about why we have an audit, and just to make sure that everyone understands there's a purpose for this. Okay, we want to identify any weaknesses in our controls. I want to identify credible charges and how they're accounted for. We want to demonstrate financial credibility. And we want to educate you in this room and our homeowners as to how we account for our money, where it goes, to ensure there's no malfeasance and that we meet a proper accounting standards. So at that, I'm going to introduce our presenter from CLA, Jean Diedrich. And Jean has been here. CLA is a very reputable firm. They were recently selected for a second time about a year ago when the Budget and Finance Committee created a working group to ensure that we had the right firm doing our independent accounting. So we went through about 3 or 4 different companies where we had personal interviews with them. We created criteria, and then we would score them independently. Each one of the people on the working group scored them independently, and CLA came out on top with no one even at a close second. So we are honored and we're pleased to have CLA and to have Jean Diedrich here. She spent, I'm trying to think, I think she spent around a week to a week and a half with she and 3 of her staff here on premise, in addition to the additional time that was spent at their office completing our audit. So at that, I'm going to turn this over to Jean, and if you'll take it from there.
Thank you. Good morning. My presentation on the Recreation Centers of Sun City West, Inc. audit. The objectives of my presentation is to allow you to understand what our audit process was and what the scope of our audit was, discuss highlights from the deliverables of the audit, and then, if desired, executive session and any questions. Our auditor's opinion was on the fair presentation of the financial statements of Recreation Centers of Sun City West for the years ended June 30, 2023 and 2022, as well as our required communications to governance and internal control communications. As part of our audit process, I do want to highlight that management was prepared and ready for the start of field work. They were easy to work with, transparent with transactions and responses, and were very responsive to our requests and gave timely feedback and assistance. As a result of our audit, we did have one audit adjustment to accrue a construction project and one past adjustment that was deemed immaterial to the users of the financial statements regarding an interest accrual with your investments. As part of our audit, we identify significant risk in our risk assessment. For your audit, we identified management's override of controls as a possible risk, as well as improper revenue recognition. In response to those risks, we obtain an understanding of the processes and internal controls over financial reporting, over revenue recognition. We test manual journal entries to see that they're properly approved and supported. We also sampled and verified revenue transactions. We issued a clean, unmodified opinion on your audit. That is the highest level of assurance a CPA firm can provide. So I want to congratulate the management for obtaining that. The organization adopted a significant standard with the lease standard, adding a right of use asset and right of use liability to the balance sheet. For your organization, the association actually purchases most of its equipment, so there really was no impact with that standard. However, just to give you some highlights of the balance sheet for the year, cash and investments decreased about $630,000. That was putting money reinvesting into the association. So you're going to see an increase of land, building, and equipment of about $3.8 million. This was offset with increases in deferred income of about $600,000. That's mainly due to some grants that the association received that are deferred until the purchases and the construction is complete. You did see a replacement fund reserve decrease. That's the unearned revenue in your reserve fund, and that's due to projects that were very significant during the year. Overall, your members' equity increased $6.5 million. Showing that is your statement of activities, the revenues and expenses of the organization, where your revenues exceeded your expenses by $6.5 million for the year. This was due to the use of the asset preservation fee increasing $3.4 million, and your return on investments increasing $500,000, as well as golf course fees increasing. Expenses, you did have an increase in wages and benefits, and we've seen this across many associations with the increase in inflation and the labor market we currently have, as well as the increase in minimum wage. This was also an increase in depreciation and amortization as your association grows. Some highlighted notes, I wanted to highlight your investments, that you have about $7 million in US equities, $600,000 in non-US equities, and $23.6 in fixed income. This is what most associations do. They're very risk adverse and their fiduciary responsibilities to protect those dollars. So you often see those invested in fixed income. Then you have your receivables to the club, from the clubs to the association, and that we're seeing that those are coming down and payments are being made on those receivables. And then the assets of the association are mainly in your land, buildings, and equipment outside of investments, with $53 million of land, building, and equipment. As our communication required to you as governance, we identified no unusual transactions, no fraudulent transactions. There was no changes from our planning to our audit scope. If there's something unforeseen or unknown, and we do identify unusual transaction, that would result in a change in our audit process. There were no such changes in our audit process. Again, the leasing standard was adopted, but no significant impact to your financial statements. Management does arrive at certain estimates in creating your financial statements. Those would include like an allowance for doubtful accounts, the useful life of property. We evaluate those estimates each year. We see if they're comparable to the previous year, if there was any change in arriving in those estimates, and we look for any bias by management. We are comfortable with those estimates, and we did not identify any bias. We encountered no difficulties in performing our audit, and there was no disagreements with management. We did have one audit adjustment, one past adjustment. The past adjustment was like $50,000 when compared to a $50 million balance sheet, very immaterial. And management was very transparent and signed the representation letter for all the information they provided us. With the internal control, as a result of the one adjustment accruing for a construction and project that occurred right at cutoff at year end, we identify if there's a reasonable possibility of the material misstatement, and so due to that adjustment, we did have the one internal control communication. And even in that communication, management had a response to it right away, and I've already implemented that response. And again, as Mr. Rhodes had indicated, we are CLA, we are a professional services firm. In addition to providing audits and assurance practice, we also provide tax services, talent search, employee retention credits, lease standard implementation, intact accounting software, you name it, we are available for any of your needs. And I am Jean Marie Dietrich. I was responsible for signing the audit, and I will open to any questions that you may have.
I'd first thank you very much. I appreciate the work that you've done. I'd like to open the questioning for our committee first. So does anyone on the committee have a question? Mr. Bosak?
More of a comment. I appreciate the professional presentation. You really have done a nice job, which you've always done, and that's why you represent your company so well. I think we need a front page story on the Rec Center News about the results of this audit. It's thorough, it's professional, it hits a lot of the high points that this committee has entertained over the last couple of years, and I think the community needs to benefit from having your information in front of them so they can appreciate the kind of work that this committee in particular goes through, and the staff, obviously, more so than we even.
Thank you. Mr. Bignato?
Initially, I thought that who am I to question an unqualified opinion? Thank you very much for your work. But I do have a question about one of the slides. I think it might have been slide 10, if we can go back to it. It had something to do with the balance in the reserve fund of equities versus debt securities.
I don't know how to do that. Thank you, Terry.
That's the one. And Cliff, you may be able to shed some. Cliff, you may have to chime in here, I'm not sure, but if I remember correctly, don't our financial policies limit the equities in the reserve portfolio to no more than 20% of the balance, the total balance?
It's 10%.
So if I'm looking at a balance sheet here that shows a total at the top there on the left side, 31,344,000 and some change, 10% of that total would only be 3 million. So how are we 7 million into equities if we're only supposed to be 10% of the total? Am I seeing it incorrectly?
I'd have to defer to Jean in terms of what she included into the 7 million. Yeah, okay.
It was too long, I could not.
Yeah, so we are 90-10. The fixed income portion of our investments is 89, and we have like 1% in cash. So I'm not sure how they aggregated those. It's a good question, but I'm not sure how what they included in U.S. equities under the equity section.
Okay, and I bring this up because there are people in the community who may be drilling down deep and looking for things that kind of don't exist, and that's why I wondered if I was reading it incorrectly. But so far I'm kind of raised another question: how did these numbers, where did they come from? Because clearly 10% of 31 million is a lot less than 7 million.
And I can answer that. I just can't answer it off the top of my head. I can drill down and get you that information.
Okay, could you do that, maybe come through Cliff and?
Yes, we
we'll
can
talk
report
about it.
that. We've got on November 7th, we have Cap Trust here, and we'll clarify that.
Perfect, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my suggestion, that Cap Trust will be here on November 7th at our next meeting, and that's an issue that we will pose to them. Actually, we'll probably pose it to them long before then, so they can do their due diligence on the research on that. Frank, very good question. Nice catch on that. Okay. I don't know that any of us can answer that right now.
Yeah, I believe there's, we had liquidated some investments to prepare ourselves for the cash transfer, and I think those may have been included in that 7 million.
That is possible.
Are we invested in treasury funds as well as actual T-bills? And I bring that up because if they're looking at a treasury fund as an equity investment, then maybe that's how that number got skewed?
Possibly, but we'll call it all out on the 7th. It's a good question.
Good deal, thanks.
Yeah, one of the things that we do, and this is really for next meeting, but we do want to segue this into the next meeting, is Cap Trust will be here, and one of the things that they will do is to explain to us how the performance of our reserve money is doing, and they can explain to us what the composition of the configuration of the funds are. We as a committee, after their presentation, have to come to a determination if we believe that Cap Trust is performing according to our policy, which is, as Cliff said, a 90-10, 90% bond, 10% equity. And then we have to make that determination. So that's actually, that whole due diligence component, will all unfold next meeting when Cap Trust is here. Thank you. Good, Frank. Does anyone else have a question or comment? Okay, if not, is there anyone in the room that has a question or a comment regarding this? If not, do we have anyone online? Christine is here. I'm sorry I didn't mention that. We do have a quorum. All of our members are here. Christine, are you online right now?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me, Dick?
Thank you. Thank you, Christine. You're monitoring the YouTube there in your right now?
Yes, I am.
Do we have any comments from YouTube that you'd like to offer?
Not at this time.
Very good. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you.
So at that, I want to thank you very much, Jean. As usual, you've done a very professional and a very thorough job. Thank you very much. So we're going to go right into the our diligence. The Budget and Finance Committee is responsible for accepting the independent audit that was conducted by CLA, and we've had no comments or remarks from anyone, any of the committee members, the audience, or on YouTube. So do we have a recommendation to adapt the CLA audit so we can forward it to the governing board? Okay, would you, is there a second?
Yes.
Thank you. Gary, could you
Sure.
wordsmith a recommendation for us? Now, it does have to be adopt. We have to adopt the
I move that we adopt the independent audit report presented by CLA in its total.
Okay. Any discussion? If not, I'm going to take a voice vote. Mr. Parsons?
I approve.
Mr. Bugnato?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Bosak?
Yes.
Thank you, thank you. So we have unanimous support. So for the minutes, we will document that we accepted the CLA report and we're forwarding it to the governing board for adoption. So we have just completed item 3.1 and 3.2, okay? The next item is something that I have moved up simply because of the duration that our meetings have gone, and traditionally we hold the policy reviews till the end. We need to get this done. We're going to do it now in the middle of the meeting. So I'm going to ask Mr. Miller to provide any comments on the policy review FI09.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Rhodes. I would note that this policy was reviewed last year and it was revised and the revisions were accepted by the governing board in November of last year. I did review it this year and I see no need to recommend any changes to the committee or to the governing board.
Does anyone have a question for Mr. Miller? Anyone in the room have a question for Mr. Miller? Anyone online on YouTube? Christine, do you have anyone that has a question or a comment?
No, Dick, no questions at this time.
Thank you, okay. So, David, do you want to prepare a recommendation that we move this forward?
Certainly. I recommend that we adopt or retain
Forward, yeah.
FI09 as it currently stands and tell the board that there is no reason to change anything.
Thank you. A second? We'll take a voice vote on that. Ms. Kellis, we'll start with you.
Yes.
Mr. Bosak?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Mr. Davis? Bugnato?
Yes.
Mr. Parsons?
Yes.
Okay, it's unanimous.
And me too, yes.
Oh, Christine, out of sight, out of mind. I am so
No
sorry.
problem.
Okay.
No, I'm trying to be a little humorous. No
Yeah, I'm
problem.
embarrassed. I'll openly admit that.
No,
Christine, just
let
out of
me-
curiosity, and it's a little late, but how did you feel on the CLA report?
Also, yes.
Thank you. So, my bad. Next, we're going to have item 3.04. That's going to be our September financials. Mr. Swan.
Good morning, Director Rhodes, and good morning, Budget and Finance Committee and community. I'd like to present the financials through the month of September in fiscal year 24. Okay, taking a look at September compared to budget. Right on budget, 23,000 favorable. We had an unexpected additional 11 days of closure in the sports pavilion. That's reflected in our numbers, but had a report from Mr. Hardesty yesterday at our managers meeting and doing very well on making up that ground in the month of October. On the expense side, 46,000 unfavorable. We had some timing items in landscape maintenance regarding chemicals and flags and pins and some repairs to our course, our closed courses at Grandview and Pebblebrook. So we'll see those come back in October. So a little bit of a timing thing there, but 46,000 unfavorable for the month of September to budget. Overall, 23,000 unfavorable at a $938,000 cash outflow versus $915,000. Keeping in mind that September is the first if you look at September, really September, October into November is when we're doing a lot of work on the courses, a lot of overseeding, and a lot of maintenance when those courses are down. So that's a large expense month for us when it comes to those areas. And wages, there's a lot of overtime as well because seed doesn't grow on our schedule. It grows on its schedule. So we have to be available. We have to spend a lot of time and energy, watching sprinklers and making sure we're not overwatering and watching the weather and being there at certain hours where we don't have to normally be there during a normal course of business. So this is reflected in our financial statements, usually in the first 3-4 months of the year. But it's all to set us up for the rest of the year. So that being said, let's take a look at the year-to-date revenue the year-to-date revenue compared to budget. September year-to-date, right on budget. Again, a little bit of a hiccup at the Sports Pavilion. On the expense side, we're really getting challenged by our utilities. I did some analysis, had the team do some analysis on our utilities, and at 118,000 unfavorable, we budgeted a 3% increase in utilities year over year. So I really wanted to spend some time because I figured you guys would have some questions about that item. So took our APS bills for July, August, and September of last year compared to this year. And our effective rate is about 13 cents per kilowatt. And last year it was 12. So that's an 8% increase just in the rate. And then if you took the overall kilowatts, some of this is, I don't know, some of you guys might like this, you're BNF people, but we had 4.4 million kilowatts this year. Last year we had 3.9 million kilowatts. So our usage has gone up 12% and our rate has gone up 8%, which kind of tells the story. So that's what we're looking at on utilities. Fortunately, compared to prior year, the rates went up, I believe, in December of last year. Unfortunately, they're probably going to go up again this December. So we'll keep an eye on that and continue to monitor that. But obviously the weather has a big impact, and that's really, really impacted us this year. But the rate increase, the 8% rate increase, was something, to be honest, we didn't budget for. So, we would have budgeted 3% on top of that increase starting in December, but I think we're going to get hit with another one. We'll keep an eye on it as we progress through the year. Overall, 14,000 unfavorable on expense. Again, we got some timing items in the maintenance area, and those will true up next month. Okay, so overall, compared to budget, operating cash outflow, 2.1 million versus 2.1 million, right on budget. Compared to prior year, running, behind prior year, 245 budgeted for overall. When we compare to prior year, wages and benefits, these were budgeted, 296,000 increase over prior year. Utilities, we've talked about that, and then landscape and repair, we budgeted an increase there, but we'll see. I believe that'll come back. Looking at the capital section, compared September this year versus budget, little behind in September on APF fees, and at 38,000 behind. In terms of our estimated reserve fund allocation, this is the money that we allocate for our reserve fund, right on budget for the month of September. And then looking at our investment income, again, I said this last meeting, and that's going to continue to be 45 to 50,000 over prior year because of the interest on short-term investments in the market. That's really helping us out on our investment income. And then unrealized loss for the month of September of $599,000. Market's still pretty volatile right now with what's going on in the world and just in general with inflation. Compared to prior year, okay, yeah. Compared to prior year, APF fees a little down at 10,000. That reserve fund allocation is behind prior year. We annualized last year's operating income, so we're going to be behind prior year because we budgeted less than we finished out than what we budgeted last year. So that's not an abnormal thing there. The variance will end up in the operating income account at the end of the year if we end up over. But in the investment income overall, 43,000 above prior year, and then the reserve fund is performing much better than it did last year in September at a $628,000 favorable change in that realized loss area. Looking year to date, APF fees are still tracking ahead of budget, which is good. And then the estimated reserve fund allocation right on budget. Investment income is favorable by $125,000. Unrealized gains and losses $765 year to date through September in valuation, negative valuation change, and then overall $581 unfavorable compared to budget. Skip that one. Okay, so compared to prior year, overall 652 favorable. Most of that is due to the unrealized gains and losses. The reserve fund is performing much better, and the investment income is $120,000 higher. Some of the changes there, just discussed 181 and APF fees, reserve fund and investment income favorability there. So looking at the September actual year to date versus the budgeted year to date, we're 587 unfavorable compared to prior year 407 favorable. Switching to the capital expenditures, on a budget of roughly $5.5 million, we're projecting a positive variance of $350,000. This is mainly due to the lack of the need for stabilization in some of the paving projects that we had done. So that created a nice plus for us in the capital section. As always, we attach the list of capital items. The highlighted items are completed, and you can see what's been PO'd and where we're at with that and what makes up the $350. Looking at our allowances, we've budgeted $400,000. We've spent $184,000 already, mainly due to the Pebblebrook well pump replacement. I'm going to plug something that's coming up in a facts and findings. We had a pump problem at Echo Mesa as well that we had to repair, the tune of about $71,000. And we'll be coming to the governing board for facts and findings on an emergency spend that we had to incur to repair that. But with that $350,000 and favorable capital spend, that's a good place to pull that from to pay for it. Looking at the fully funded balance percentage with all the adjustments year to date compared to budget, we're right on budget at 49% FFB through September. That concludes my financial presentation for September, Director Rhodes.
Okay, do we have any questions from the committee? Mr. Bosak?
I think we're all glad to have our worst quarter behind us. but I'm heartened by the fact that we're so close to budget. Just shows that you did a really good job and thoughtful allocation of thinking to come as close as you did. I just have a question in regard to landscape maintenance. I know the dollar amount was very high. Do you have payroll in there as well, or is that all contractor or supplies that on that expense line?
The landscape maintenance is mostly seed, chemicals, flag pins and cups, and
So if we pay
also-
if we pay contractors to trim palm trees,
yes, it's in there.
Yeah, that's in there. Okay, so there is an
Correct.
element of payroll, but not our people.
Yes, there's also in repairs and maintenance, because that's where we also pay contractors in that area too for maintenance on some of that stuff. So it's in those two buckets.
That was going to be the next question. Okay.
Yes.
Just the last comment. You've always done a really good job of explaining this. It would be just my request. Page 3, you're kind of stating what we can see.
Yeah.
It would be helpful if you had some explanation of why those things are the way they are, rather than just restating the numbers. You know, you state the numbers to budget, you state the numbers to last year, and we can see that on here. But it might save you and prompt some thoughts on our part if you could explain some of the rationale for that. I think we used to see that, but I don't know, we've gotten away from it.
So yeah, I mean, if there's a big outlier, I will explain it. You know, I would say, to explain it now, when we're talking about the maintenance areas, again, that's a lot of that's the timing of when items were budgeted versus when they actually got done. So there's some timing items within there. Wages and benefits, that was a little unfavorable, and it was because when I put the budget together for overtime, I didn't budget enough overtime in the month of September. However, I believe that'll come back in October as well, based on when that overtime was paid out.
Understand the overtime segment.
Yeah.
How much of that was driven by minimum wage increase from a year ago as well? Or is that already accounted for?
That's already accounted for in the budget.
Yeah, I know in the budget, but compared to last year?
Oh, compared to prior year?
Yes.
Compared to prior year, that variance is explained here. Talking about 23 versus 24, these are the variances year to date, and those are the main variances on the expense line items, the expense categories, and the explainers to that.
And I just want to remind some of us that prior to us making an issue out of getting competitive to be able to hire maintenance workers for particularly the golf course, all they had to look forward to every year was a 3% quote-unquote merit raise. And then you made a number of adjustments to be competitive, and I think we've gone from being probably 60% properly staffed to a little bit higher than that. I don't think our needs are as great as they were a year or two ago. At least I hope they wouldn't. Yes,
so we've gotten healthier in the golf area when it comes to the greenskeepers and maintenance workers in golf. We're still short, but we've also found ways to supplement some of that with outside services, to your point earlier. So yeah, we're doing the best we can with what we have.
As the USGA representative pointed out in the audit, normal for our courses would be 12 to 14 people. And we've had at Trail Ridge over the last 2 years as few as 4 or 6 on occasion. So we'll never get to 12 or 14, but we can certainly get to better than we were. And the benefit of that is you don't put a lot of work on people that show up every day. It's a fair job for them to accomplish. So we got to keep looking at that.
Yeah, we're at 7 to 9 per course right now.
That's better than we were. Good.
Yes.
Thank you.
We've made up some ground.
Thanks.
Yep.
Mr. Bagnato?
Thank you, Dick. This isn't going to win me any friends either, but the question that I have is the utility bills are enormous. I think that Bill Schwinn once described our expenses here as people in power, with power in the second position. I'll add water because that's also part of the utility bills. My question is, there are certain clubs who have their own standalone facilities, and presumably may even have their own standalone meters. Are they contributing anything towards their increased cost of utilities? Or do we just continue to pay the bills for them and pass the costs along to the rest of the community? If we're not getting extra revenue from the clubs to cover these utilities, why not?
Okay. To answer your question, no, we don't collect fees from the clubs. Why not? When they establish clubs, when you get your brochure and what's included with your dues, clubs is one of those things that's listed on there along with utilities. So maybe more of a philosophical, deeper question. Maybe not for me.
I'd actually like to add to that. A very wise man once told me that we pay every day to heat the swimming pool. Not everybody swims in the swimming pool. That analogy, we have two issues. One is expense and one is revenue. You know, we don't have a P&L where we look to try to break even or where we look to charge back to a club. These are the benefits of living in the community, that the community provides the option of a club that includes space and utilities and heat. So that analogy to have, just because they have a standalone meter, really doesn't mean anything other than the fact that that's part of the cost that we incur in the community to provide the level of amenities that we do.
The problem that I have with the swimming pool analogy is that I don't need to be a member of the swimming club to go in the pool. In other words, it's available to me at my beck and call, and if I choose not to go in it, that's fine too. The issue that I bring up with the clubs is that I have to be a member of the club to enjoy the benefits of that club. I can't just walk in there and start running an engine lathe, an example, in the metal shop. And I'm not trying to pick on any one club, but what I'm trying to do is perhaps just allocate some of the costs of carrying these clubs onto the clubs themselves. I know from seeing that there's times when you walk into some of the, I'm just going to use the wood shop as an example, and there's not a whole lot of noise going on except for the air conditioning, and mostly it's just guys sitting around waiting for some kind of a project to cross their path. And so it becomes more of a clubhouse that's limited just to the members of the club. I realize that this will never be a popular opinion, but my opinion is that we should perhaps start surcharging the clubs because the utility costs are out of control.
I think that's something that may deserve discussion. But as you say, you know, this is an opinion, and it's yours and mine, and everybody in this room has an opinion. And I appreciate that, Frank. You always provide insight for us. Dwayne? Thank you. Dwayne?
Yeah, thanks, Dick. Since I'm new, this may be just a dumb question, but I'm on slide 7, and we talked about the utilities. It's a utility question. You know, we budgeted 3%. Actual was 8%, I think Cliff said. Usage went up 12%. So how do we take that into account for, say, next year's budget? And I don't ever see utilities staying at 3% anymore. Or at what point do we possibly increase that percentage for budgeting?
I think that's a really good question. And in my own experience, I would say that we call those learning opportunities.
That's right.
You know, we make an assumption, and I'm not going to say what an assumption does, but you know, when you break that apart, what that does and what it says. But we learn from our mistakes, and I don't know if they're really mistakes. They're just like, that didn't work, so we have to go to something else. So I will turn it over to you, Cliff, from a managerial perspective. When you make budgetary assumptions, how do you do that?
So we're going to talk a little bit about this on the indexing section. So in terms of assumptions, specifically with utilities, what we looked at was the fact that we had a lot of enhancements, improvements to our infrastructure. So we were kind of looking at an offset there in savings when it came to utilities when we put the budget together. We did not foresee that in the month of July, the temperature didn't go below 110 degrees for the whole month. It averaged over 110 degrees. So that was kind of an outlier. And to your point, when we put the budget together, we spend a lot of time, and I spend a lot of time, and I agonize over the expense side of the budget, of course, because we have to justify to our community the dues and everything. So I think I may have gotten a little aggressive on the utilities. So we will learn from that, and when we put the budget together for next year, we'll keep that in mind.
Okay, do we have any other questions from the committee? Okay, Mr. Miller?
Cliff, this may not be, you may not really be the right person to answer this question, but does the rec center have a formal energy conservation program? I know
Not that I'm aware of.
we went through a whole lot of things to replace incandescent lights with LEDs as
Yeah.
an energy savings measure.
Right.
But, I look at things, and I'm sure we have programmable thermostats that drop the temperature in the buildings or change the temperatures, in low occupancy hours.
Yes.
Do we set the thermostats uniformly across all of the facilities?
Yeah, in fact, we have a whole software kind of hub down in maintenance that we connect. We're connected to all of our thermostats and units. In fact, we just spent some money in adding the wood shop, I believe, to that, or the metal shop. One of them, we just added to it. So yes, we do. We do have efforts that we, take to conserve energy, and we have members telling us that the lights are on at,
Right.
at the pickleball
Right.
courts at 5:30 in the morning when nobody's there. So there are things. We have timers, things like that. Yes.
Okay, well, I guess I'd ask the question, I personally have always found this room right here that we're in,
Mhm.
it's a little cool to me.
Sure.
Okay, so the real question is, what do we set the thermostats to? Is it 72, 73? How much money would you change if you changed the temperature of the rooms by 2 degrees? Has anybody ever looked at that? I'm seeing lots of head nods back in the back of the room.
You
so-
know,
You're married, aren't you, Mr. Miller?
Yes, I am.
Okay. What's
So-
cold to you?
At least today I am, so,
Make
yeah.
that cold to someone
So-
else.
So I think what I'd like to do here is that we can debate
Yeah, fair enough.
find individual issues, about conservation of energy. I will ask, I'm going to ask Mr. Schwend at the next meeting if he will care to make comments on the types of conservation that we practice. I wish Russ were here, because I'm sure Russ would walk up there and probably give us a 15-minute dissertation on what he's doing, and we would all be amazed. So, but on that, I don't think we need to go into any more on this. So would you be acceptable to that, David? Okay. So for Lynn, for our minutes, we're going to ask Mr. Schwinn. And if your comments can be brief, we would appreciate that as well. I'm sure you can capture those in about 2 sentences. So, Mr. Bosak?
Just maybe something to add to that list. I can't ever remember us talking about solar. I mean, it was a hot button for a long time, and there was a lot of conversation about it. And every time I go down one of the streets over in Sun City, I see those massive coverings that they've put together for solar. I just don't know where we are today, what our position is, how aggressive, or have we just kind of ruled it off as not a possibility? So if that could be included, I'd appreciate that.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments? Okay, Mr.
Yes,
Bagnato?
sir.
Wait, one more, Christine. Okay, we've got Mr. Bagnato.
Gary, you took away my thunder. As far as the solar, the very last thing I remember regarding the community looking at solar was when Mike Whiting said that we have someone at ASU looking at that for us. And I think it was just another of Mike Whiting's excuses, and I'm sorry, but he refused to ever consider putting solar anywhere. Can we look at it again? Solar industry changes a lot. The tax credits make a big deal. We don't pay taxes. So it's not easily said by let's just flip a switch and start putting up panels. Is it even possible that the community could benefit from putting up a parking lot full of solar panels in the current environment? I don't know.
So I would actually like to respond to that. I think those are all fair questions. And those are things that I do not want to lose. You know, but I really don't want to put those on the issues that we're talking about right now. Let's deal with the things that we have at hand. We have issues with the financial index. We have credit card issues. We have a host of things. I'd like to put that in a parking lot, and we'll come back to it. Okay? So at that, do we have any other questions? Okay, so Christine, do you have anyone on YouTube that has a comment or a question?
Well, before I do that, may I ask a question, please?
Absolutely.
Thank you. This also may fall into, this is again for the staff, Cliff. As we prepare for our next budget season, I would love to know, I don't believe you have these answers at hand, and that's okay, but you were talking a little bit, we were talking about utilities and so forth. As a part of that, we can't predict the Mother Nature bit, but there are two areas where I know other owner members have reached out to me, maybe other members of the committee too. It's about irrigation. We've heard many times we're saving a dramatic amount of water due to our irrigation project at Grandview. But we also have some additional expenses because we have new plantings that we're putting in. I would love to see, before we head into our next predictive cycle, I'd love to see some specifics about what we expect of a net. In other words, over the next year or maybe even two, we may have some additional expenses to care for the new plantings. We all expect that there's going to be an offset. We're going to save a lot more in water than we will for the new costs, but we'd love to see some predictions around that. A lot of members have reached out. If you could reach out, maybe, as you guys always do, partner with our folks in environmental and show our members and us some of the assumptions that we have going into next year. We'd love to see those before we head into the next cycle. And similarly, we're talking a lot about utilities and expenses, and you're going to change some assumptions, which again, it's a very difficult job, and you guys do a great work in terms of predicting forward. Love to see a little bit more information as well, me and as an individual, and I know a few other members have mentioned too. We have extensive building management systems that we just referred to. There's some data there that we're going to build into going forward. We keep hearing complaints or observations or what have you from our members and even ourselves about lighting being left on and so on and so forth. Perhaps a little bit of information or showing us where some of those building management system software outputs are being baked into our assumptions. That would really go a long way toward answering some of my questions so that I'm not grilling you guys in future months, but rather we have some of those assumptions at the hand. So do you think you could call both of those out for us as we head into the next cycle in some way?
Could I make a comment here? I think that the concern I have here is this is so new, we really don't know what's going to happen. We suspect that we're going to have a level of savings. As a matter of fact, we have a high level of confidence that we are, but we don't know. The same thing with the plantings. I went over and I saw that as well. And although they do grow quickly, there's no question that the number of low plantings that we have will require additional work. I think that's a little early for us to make those determinations, but I see that Go ahead,
Yeah,
Christine.
I'm sorry. I do understand that and agree. I wouldn't expect personally, Mr. Chairman, that we're going to see a lot of precision, but just the first cut of what we are predicting. And then next year, over the next fiscal year, we can monitor our actuals against what we assumed and adjust, again, learn and adjust going into the year following. That's all I'm asking, rather than We all expect this to happen, but I think our members and owners would also appreciate a little more visibility on what we expect the assumptions to be. I know it's a bit of a slippery slope. We're not trying to, I'm not suggesting we micromanage, but rather just get a viewpoint of what we're expecting of a net savings there in Grandview. And then we can use that to understand what to expect in future years in terms of expenses and so forth. Just
I think that's very clear. I
a
appreciate
thought.
that.
Thank-
Mr. Schwind is here. He's going to make a comment, I believe.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Members of the board, good morning. Couple comments there. A little bit of homework on the energy conservation. We can definitely put a report together there and talk to you all about what we're currently doing and steps we can take to move forward. There are solar files in the office that we can dig up and obviously look at new functions as far as that goes. But a lot of that taking place, Sun City and high school around the state of Arizona, were a federally funded program that no longer exists when all those kind of went in. So we'd look at that. But the other scenario, to Christine's comments too, we also need to educate and maybe reinform and do a better job on our webpage to really understand the water concept here in Arizona. Our golf courses are watered with groundwater. That is a completely different function than potable water. So financial savings on using less water on our golf courses is not there. It's a function of electricity. How much water you're bringing out of the ground is where our golf courses cost us money. It's not the distribution of that water. We have rights to that water already. The goal is to use less, not a financial savings per se, but a savings in electricity. Now, irrigation on agricultural club growing plants, certainly. Can we monitor that water? Can we look at what we're doing? Low water use toilets, those kinds of things. Potable water that we're paying EPCOR for is a true savings measure in water, not the groundwater. And that just needs to be further educated and get out there in front of the folks. Thank you.
One comment I would like to make, Mr. Schwind, is we are very interested in the solar. I do not want that on our agenda for the next 2 weeks or for the next 2 budget cycles. We want to, or budget meetings. I want to hold that because we have other issues that we're dealing with. That is such a major issue. And then on the issue that Christine brought up, if you could just give us an overview on that, and we'll actually schedule that. I don't know if it's going to be next meeting, maybe the one after that. Okay, we're trying to pace ourselves here to make sure that we get all of the important issues dealt with in a timely way. Okay, thank you very much. Christine, do you have any other comments that you'd like to make?
Not at all, but thank you very much to you and to Mr. Schwind for clarifying.
Thank you. And do we have any comments from our viewers on YouTube?
No, no comments at this point from our online viewers.
Okay, do we have any comments from the floor? Anyone in the building? No? Okay, thank you. So we need to move, we need to have an agreement to forward to the governing board for filing the financial report for September. Any opposition to that?
So moved.
So moved. Okay, ma'am. So it will be done. So the minutes will show that. We have one of the major issues that we wanted to deal with this year, and this is an issue of a budgetary financial index. We've talked about that. We talked about it last year. We actually appointed a working group that Christine Novella was the advisor for, and that working group consisted of Gary Bosak and Ray Davis, Cliff Schwann, and Terry West. They're ready to present that, and I'm going to turn the microphone over to Christine so she can begin for us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, everybody. You really did the introduction that I was going to do, which is fine. So really wanted to just this is our opportunity to go through with you for the committee and for the rest of our owner members, the study that we took on to look at the use of economic or financial indices to inform or to somehow inform our policies around budgetary considerations. Really pleased that I had the opportunity to work with a couple of true thought leaders and independent thinkers, excuse me. Mr. Gary Bosack, Mr. Ray Davies really did a lot of the thought here and the heavy lifting in that regard. I served as an advisor, as you said, together with Cliff and Terry, and we've had a series of meetings that have been published on our website. Although none of our owner members joined us at those meetings, they were open for comments and so forth. So this is our opportunity to summarize the findings, and not only because I'm at home today, but also because they are closest to it. I'm going to turn this over to really Gary and Ray to walk us through the bulk of their thought and their findings and our collective recommendations. So Gary, over to you.
Thanks, Christine and Dick. Just a bit of context setting before we get into the presentation. How did we wind up even considering this as something we wanted to take on? Every spring, as we go through the plan process and the development of the budget, it seems like we do shadow boxing, and we have all kinds of debate about things that are more important to some people than others, and everybody has their thoughts about where their points of interest are. What they for the most part don't understand is that 98% of our revenue is in two areas: dues and golf. And if you look at the profit and loss statement, you'll see some other lines up there that are kind of camouflage for golf revenue, like merchandise sales, ancillary revenues, food and beverage. I know golfers drink more beer than pavilion people, but that's okay. But all that added together, literally 98% of the budget for the revenue that this community entertains and develops is in those two areas. So not a lot of levers to pull when you're talking about options of what to do. The reason I say that is because the indices conversation came up as an attempt to take some of the angst out of those conversations, give an opportunity to the community to better understand how dues increases in particular are established. If it was attached to an index, that might be the case. So that was the driving force behind what our challenge was. And if you want to go to the first slide, this is what Dick and Christine challenged Ray and I, and for the most part, Cliff and Terry, to do. We identify, collect, and analyze the data relevant to using indexing in the budget creation process. We didn't limit it to just dues. We did restrict it to the entire budget process hour. Provide a rationale to either accept or reject indexing, provide discussion points to the BNF, and then make a recommendation to the BNF on whether we should or should not use indexing. So what we'll do today, Cliff is going to first carry through with you to the process as it currently exists. What do they go through to create the budget? Most people in the community, again, don't understand or even appreciate the number of meetings, the number of exposures, the number of conversations that take place as the budget gets created. So Cliff's going to give you an overview of that, but in the context of where indexing might fit in. Then I'll come on to talk about the considerations that we made. Some of the considerations were more obvious than others. Ray will then talk about the pluses and minuses of considering indexing. I'll come back with the final recommendations, and then we'll open it up for questions to the Budget and Finance and any of the questions that the people online or in the audience might have. So Cliff, yours.
Thank you, Gary. So, in the budgeting process, we have a policy kind of structured around, and it provides the framework for the planning and execution of the budget. So policy F515 does this, and the components of the annual financial plan or the budget is that we provide a full-time equivalent plan, a revenue plan, operating expenses, capital projects, and a financial 5-year forecast. Now, in the budgeting process, there are a lot of different indicators that we look at. But when we build when we build the budget, we start with what are the services that need to be provided to this community. What is the community asking us to do? And that really is the linchpin, so to speak, as to how our expense aligns with what services we're going to provide. So when we do that, there are a lot of different indicators that we look at. So the first thing we do is we look at we set up, capital budget meetings are held with managers and committees. So these are all the meetings that we're going through currently with our capital budget. So we first look at the reserve study. Within that reserve study, there's specific items that come up every year that need to be repaired and replaced. Attached to that reserve study is a component for inflation. So we apply inflation to those items. But that reserve study is a living, breathing document. It could change multiple times in one day. Because when we go out and price something or pay for something or add something to that reserve study, it gets priced at the real value at the time it's purchased or completed. And then that may have an impact on various items that are in the reserve study that need to be replaced or repaired down the line. So we readjust the pricing at that time. So the reserve study, it's that 1,200 line plus line item list of assets that are over 5,000 that have a 5-year useful life at least, and those are being constantly adjusted real time as we work through it. And then we also need to adjust it for new items that get added. So anything in an unforeseen item or any new capital item gets added to that list as well. So it's constantly changing. The point is it's constantly changing, and we're constantly looking at that and repricing and revaluing based on real-time numbers, as well as adding inflation to that as we move it down the line, depending on however many years it needs to be replaced in. We also have strategic meetings with managers to discuss positions. So we have services that we provide. Within those services, there's people, like Mr. Bagnato said earlier, referring to Mr. Swend, people in power. People is our largest expense. So we spend a ton of time looking at our full-time equivalents in the budgeting process, all service-based. And then we not only look at those current positions, we also look at a merit increase, which is established every year in the budget cycle. It's typically about 3%. And then a large driver of our wages expense is attributable to minimum wage. And so the mandates we receive from the state of Arizona, we've got 480 employees. 75% of those are either directly or indirectly tied to minimum wage. It's a huge indicator that we look at when it comes time to budget for that. And we estimate minimum wage because the minimum wage comes out in September. We start our budget in January. So we estimate minimum wage, but that has a large impact on our expense structure. So again, that has a huge impact in our budgeting process, but it's another indicator that we look at. We also look at inflation when it comes to the benefits and the other things aligned with wages. And then we have strategic meetings to establish line item operating expenses. So we've got our operating expenses for the budget, and we take the current year operating expenses, and when we start the budgeting process in January, we forecast 6 months of operating expenses based on the budget, based on where we're at year to date, and based on just an overall projection if we're lining up with budget or not. Make adjustments in that projection, and that's the baseline for our operating expenses for the following year budget. And then we apply an inflation factor to items that are recurring that we know are going to increase. And then we look at specific line items that are non-recurring, and we add items such as flooring projects or things that come up that aren't going to be capitalized, but we have to expense. And we take off current year one-off items that we're not going to be doing in the following year. And so that's how we develop that operating budget. And it really is a grassroots, departmental, from headcount to operating expenses to specific line items. And so that's our budgeting process. And I guess to summarize all of that is we do use indicators, but tying ourselves to one wouldn't be something that we'd want to do, because we wouldn't get a true picture of what our expenses would actually be. So that's what we do in terms of indicators in the budgeting process when it comes to the capital budget and the operating budget.
Okay, thank you. Okay, what indexes did we consider? The Consumer Price Index, everybody's pretty much familiar with that. It measures the overall change in consumer prices based on a representative basket of goods and services with an assigned weighted average over time. The government actually goes out and surveys 24,000 people when they go through a cycle, and they have 48,000 interviews they conduct with other consumers to determine what it is that they bought. They have people actually keeping diaries to determine what that basket of goods should accommodate. It changes over time. If you were to look at the history of the CPI, you'd see that there are many, many different iterations, updates, changes based on data that was more current and more reliable. So they've worked hard at giving us something that's manageable. The cost of living adjustment assigned by the Social Security Administration measures the overall change in the CPI for July, August, and September of the previous year with an average of the same 3-month period in the current year. And I hate to be the bearer of bad tidings, but the COLA for next year for all of us seniors has been established. It will be 3.2%. And that won't keep you up with inflation, but that's what the adjustment's going to wind up being. The next one is the Employment Cost Index, quarterly economic series that details the growth of total employment compensation. And I'll jump down to the last one, which is a Personal Consumption Index, measures the prices that people living in the United States are actually paying for goods and services. I looked at those two as well as Chairman Rhodes and Christine because they were submitted by a BNF alumnus, John Hobold. John is a very active researcher and did a tremendous job of analyzing the index possibilities for us, submitted a detailed recommendation, also included other indices besides these two. But by the time we got done looking at all the possibilities, this kind of muddied the waters a little bit. We were trying to keep it simple. So we opted to use the third one, which is the inflation rate, and that's simply the measuring the yearly change in the CPI between two periods of time. So the CPI, the COLA, and the inflation are the indices that we decided to look at. And the reason we did is because they're all interrelated. The Consumer Price Index is used to measure or actually calculate inflation. The cost of living adjustment increases the Social Security and the supplemental Social Security to counteract inflation, and the inflation rate measures the yearly change in CPI between periods of time. So the interrelationship between those three tend to balance everything out. And when you look at the history of those, the most recent history we looked at was the last 15 years, the differences in the impact of those is minimal, both on the low side and the high side. But price index, again, goes back to 1913 when it first began, the COLA, 1914. And the cost of living adjustments that were made over that period of time based on inflation were up and down, but for the most part, they're a fairly flat, low percentage line. In fact, over that period of time, there were actually 13 years where we had deflation. And the last time that happened was in 1955, but you don't ever want to have that again. That's worse than the alternative. So if you click to the next slide, this is just a graph that Cliff has used before to get into the dues conversation. It shows that we had 3 years where inflation actually exceeded the dues increases, 2014, 21, and 23. But again, it's kind of an up and down curve. And the very next one is a mirror image, so to speak, because this is the COLA versus the dues. And again, 3 years, 2014 again, 2017, 2021 again, where the COLA has outpaced the dues increase, which doesn't happen very often. So what does all this mean? We actually did a worksheet. I know you aren't going to see it from here, but you're going to see a mess of stuff. And what this did is it plotted, for the last 15 years, all three indexes for each year and the percent of increase for the dues. And how did we make some sense out of this? That's the next page. So in the first 6 years, 2009 to 2014, now understand that it's not sensical to average averages, but the way these averages all kind of lump themselves together, it seemed to make an okay comparison, even though most would discourage doing average of averaging. So for that period of time, that 6 years, the average dues increase was 3.9%. The indexing average was 1.7%. 2015 through 20, the next 6 years, the average dues increased 3.5%, and the indexing average 1.5%. So what you might gather from that is our dues outpaced the indexing and could have been lower. But when you look at locking something into an index of 1.7% or 1.5%, you really have a disaster in waiting. That certainly is not even close to enough to pay for the goods and services that we have in our benefit here in Sun City West. So on the other side of that, I wanted to say that the 2021 and 22, where we were ravaged by inflation, and again, when you look at the last 3 years of inflation, it's 16.7%. And I would also hasten to add, if you pay any attention to the media, which unfortunately sometimes you're forced to do, they would say, and they have said over the last 2 years, that Arizona was one of the leading inflation states in the country, anywhere from 1.5% to 2% higher than the norm. And everything that we're using on these calculations are the national norms. So they don't take into account, A, the kind of community that Sun City West is, very service-oriented, very heavy laden with expense, but very maintenance heavy as well with the quality of the facilities that we have. So for the 2021 and 22 periods of time, the average dues increase went up 2.4%, and the indexing average of all three for that same period of time was 6.6%. So you can make the case that indexing would have been beneficial for some people on the low end, but on the high end, we would be locked into percentages due to inflation that were unnecessarily high, and the dues increase would not have been that high, would not have been required to be that high. So what would have happened if we'd have been locked into the low index? 4 things could have taken place if we are only looking at 1 to 2% annual dues increases. First one is that we'd have had to lay off people in the organization. The only way we're going to reduce our payroll. Cut back on hours, cut back in services of hours. Second would be cut back on projects. It's another way to react to that kind of index. The last would be to increase dues for golf, because remember we said 98% of the revenue comes from dues in golf. So when we think about increasing dues in golf, we also run the risk of alienating golfers. We did that a few years ago, and the rounds of golf went down dramatically. People decide pretty much every year how many rounds of golf they're going to play in a year, and they set their budgets accordingly. So increasing golf rates significantly to make up that kind of difference would not work. I've heard some golf scholars in the community offer different solutions, like why don't we close a course? That goes back to 2015. That was a bad idea. How about if we restrict the usage of our courses to residents only? Just a reminder that non-resident and guest play contributes $2.2 million to golf revenue in the community. If we did that, and we had to make up that $2.2 million, every member's dues in this community would go up $81 for the year, right out of the box. So not a good idea, and not something that we ever even want to have to consider. So the point of all that is we want to avoid having to get in those situations where we have to make those kinds of judgments, because that destroys the kind of community that we all love, and that's why we're here. So the point being, either side of this, there's an argument to be made, but the devastation it would cause on the short side is unconscionable, and taking advantage of an index to increase dues more than they needed to be is on the high side. So the alternative created a rationale, and I'm going to ask Ray to cover that with you.
Which brings us to, what do we want to do? How are we going to approach this from a decision-making standpoint? So if we were to accept this, ease the annual budgeting process, and it would apply, which would apply a percentage across the board. Every budget, every line item, dues, everything would be predetermined. It would simplify the decision-making process. It would match the volatility of our inflation. However, we are already considering that. So we'll go into the rejecting side of it. Using an index for budgeting planning could be seen as a rubber stamping unnecessary increases, which would essentially box in the budgeting process. Inflation indices are already factored into the budget and rec center dues increases. None of the existing indices are based upon the specific types of expenses incurred by Sun City West. For example, our large annual expenditures for grass seed and fuel. The annual budget struggle is a necessary part of the compromise, which results in the best possible outcome. We had a lot of discussion about this, and because the budget process is very complex, very painful, and it takes us a lot of hours, man hours, people working diligently to try to improve the process. And that struggle is necessary for us to have the best outcome. The idea of using a COLA index is a referendum rejected by the community in 2015, and Gary has more to say about that.
Those of you that were here in 2015, remember those 3 amendments that were proposed by a small group of dissatisfied residents. The first one would have caused golf to have to break even, which at the point in time we were at was an impossibility. Some of the suggestions they had, I mentioned earlier, dramatically increasing golf rates, closing a golf course. They had some other alternatives, none of which were very reasonable. The second one was that any project committed to by the community had to be approved if it was over $100,000 by a vote of the community. We have a governing board in place, we have committees in place, we have a staff that knows exactly what's going on. All of those people are much more informed to make that decision rather than a vote of the community. And the last one came in to our attention because we wondered, what if we had a vote of the community as to whether we should index something like this? And we had a history. In 2015, the third thing they wanted to do was attach the annual dues increase to the cost of living adjustment. And at that time, in 2014, 15, 16, and 17, the COLA was an average of 1% each of those 4 years. And that's kind of what built the momentum for that type of activity. So if you were here in 2015, you probably remember standing out in the parking lot for 2 hours waiting to vote over at the library. Normally, we would have about 1,000 people, maybe 800 or 900 vote for that election. For those 3 amendments, we had 15,000 people vote in this community. And 13,000 of them said, those are bad ideas, don't mess with our community, we like it the way it is. And they were rejected by 87%, 85%, and the COLA by 83%. So it was a memorandum and a referendum that kind of set us on the path of coming to the next sheet, which says that we strongly recommend that indexing not be attached to the current FI-15 policy, not make it a policy, but at the same time, we suggest that operations continue to consider indexing when creating the financial plan. If it fits the purpose, which it has in numerous instances where they've already put it in place, use that as a rationale for making a decision. But if it doesn't, don't consider it. Then the last point is, again, planners, there's a lot of hands involved in creating the budget. Planners should be bold in their assumptions that 83% of Sun City West owner members want the current level of service and facility maintenance retained. And I think that's the truth of the vast majority of people in this community. They love what they have, they want to maintain it, they want to retain it, and continue to enjoy that. And then the last page is one that Christine would have done something different if she was here. She promised to sing it. Well, you could sing it over the phone. You can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, well, you just might find you get what you need. And that we attribute to the Rolling Stones, and that's kind of what this has been all about. So anyway, thanks for your attention, and I'll open it to any questions from the committee.
I would like to say that I appreciate the work that was done by this group. I think it's very thorough, it's complete. There is controversy to it, but that's why we have identified it, and that's why we're doing what we are today, and that's why we're having this in a public forum. So at this point, I want to open the questions or comments up to the committee. And I will, if anyone has questions or comments, I would entertain that right now. We do not.
There's only one thing I'd like to add, Dick, if I may.
Thank you, yes.
Thank you. I also want to thank everyone who participated. Not only, although I mentioned that we did not have any specific owner members who attended our meetings, there were some folks who asked questions early on last year, as well as during the process in other settings. So we thank those of you who contributed. It was all considered. I especially want to thank both Ray and Gary, my colleagues here on the committee, for putting so much time and effort into this. If it didn't come across abundantly, it really, they took a great deal of time in researching these things and really thinking them through critically and thinking outside of their own individual personal beliefs, which I just wanted to thank them for that. And sort of in summary, that we wanted to be, sometimes we get very serious and we need to be serious with these topics in budget and finance. But that last slide from the Rolling Stones song, "You Can't Always Get What You Want," harkens back to some of the points that Ray was making about the struggle that we go through every year with our budget. It may seem it's challenging, right? But the key thing to remember is that if we're doing this correctly as a community, as a group of fellow, as members, right? If we're doing this correctly, then none of us will get everything we want. There's always an element of compromise here. There's always an element of feeling like you wish that you had something more as an individual, but the community benefits from having these debates, from this discourse. So it may be a little uncomfortable at times, but it's a very important part. The struggle, as we named it, as I think Ray's words were, very important part. So a little humor to kind of, wrap up the serious topic, but I just wanted to thank them and also state, that's the reason why we included, not only just to have a little smile, but also we can't always get what we want, but the opportunity here is to get what we need. Thank you.
Thanks, Christine. Nice recap.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions or comments from anyone in the audience? Christine, do we have any questions or comments from anyone on YouTube?
None at this time.
Okay, thank you. This process could not have been more transparent. I'm not certain how many meetings they actually had, the task force or the working group. I think it's around 6. Gary, do you remember what you had? Lost track. They were all public. And I think they've done a marvelous job. So at that, I think we're going to entertain a recommendation on this. So do I have a recommendation on action of the working group?
Why don't we just use the words we had? We strongly recommend that indexing not be added to the current FI-15 policy.
Okay. Would you like to put that into a recommendation? Would you rephrase it for me?
I so move that we strongly recommend that indexing not be added to the current FI-15 policy.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Do we have any discussion? Okay, I'll take a vote, and I want an individual count. Yes, would you start with Mr. Parsons?
I vote yes on this.
Mr. Regnato?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Bosak? Ms. Callis? Christine?
Yes.
Okay, we have a unanimous recommendation that will be forwarded to the governing board to, we'll re-wordsmith this, but to accept the strongly recommend that indexing not be included in the current FI-15 policy. I would like to make an editorial comment about that particular policy. FI-15 was originally scheduled to be reviewed in late September, and we intentionally pulled it from the queue because we wanted to wait until the results of this working group. Mr. Miller has responsibility for review of that policy, and I'm going to put it back on the agenda, and we'll put it on the agenda for November the 7th. Okay, so moved. Thank you very much. Item 3.06. This has to do with credit card and transaction fees, eChecking. This is an interim presentation by Cliff, and I believe there's also some follow-up for IT as well. So Cliff?
Yes, I'm going to present some of the, I wasn't here for the last meeting, but did watch the video, also circled back with the team, and I know there was some kind of homework assignments from that, so I'm going to talk about some of the hard costs associated with the impacts of charging processing fees. There are some assumptions in there, but we have to, incorporate that into the thought process, and then just kind of summarize where we're at, and then Katie's here to answer any questions on the IT side. But with that said, we'll get into this. So the increase in yearly costs, we have to, some of these we feel are pretty solid numbers. Some of them are guesses because we don't really know what the impact specifically will be in terms of how many people are going to move to a different payment type. So, but we put these together just to show, and these are to go across the board with processing fees in terms, if the decision is made to charge processing fees, these are kind of some of the impacts of that on the expense structure. And I tried to break them out in different areas in case, so that you could look at them and decide, oh, okay, well, what if we just decided to do it in this area? Then it would, give a cost associated with one area versus all areas. That being said, total recurring costs increase, estimating at $284,000. 86,000, I updated that number because we actually got some hard numbers based on what one of the other communities is paying for armored car service. They pay $900 a month for one location. We have an armored car location pickup at one location. So if you took that and, spread that out over 8 locations, and the yearly impact of that would be $86,000 in terms of armored car service. And then bank charges, again, had to put an estimate on how many people would move to checks and cash and what the impact of that would be on our bank charges from our bank. Because if those would increase, our bank charges would increase accordingly. We estimate that will be $30,000 for the year. IT costs, these are hardware and licensing, yearly hardware and licensing costs for additional people to be added for the additional FTEs, as well as the additional services or points of sale that will need to be added. We estimate that at $8,000 per year. And then on the labor side, I know we kind of got in the weeds a little bit on that at the first meeting, but to break that out by division, golf $120,000, membership $40,000. These would be for the FTEs per golf course, and membership for the additional processing of cash and checks and reconciliation and moving customers through the checkout process in a timely manner. And then in terms of a one-time cost, we're estimating a $50,000 for cost for development from the software company TEI to develop the software to be able to do this in the manner that we want to do it if we decide to move forward. And that will take the development time, they've estimated us, would be at 6 months. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what that development would need to be on the next couple of slides to give some context to that. So in terms of, our IT capabilities or our capabilities with TEI, we currently have, this is what we currently can do when it comes to processing credit cards and processing payments. Okay, so we can collect payments on the portal via credit card. So billed charges, which are member dues, customers or members can go on the portal and pay with their credit card. We have that capability now. We're also able to collect payment on the portal for member dues via ACH or eCheck. Okay, we have that capability. Now it needs to be tested. It's going to take approximately two months to roll that out. So this is the capability we just gained that we've started talking about last year being able to do. We're in the process of that, and we're estimating approximately 2 months to be able to get that functionality. So for members to be able to go on those billed charges, which are member dues, to be able to go online and pay with an e-check. That capability is coming. We can do it. We're just got to get it working and turned on, and the process is put in place and tested and everything. It's going to take roughly a couple of months to do that. And then we can charge a processing fee for member dues only, but for members only, okay? So what happens is the way our system charges for member dues, for members, it's considered a billed charge. It goes on an account, a statement, okay? That's how our system is set up to bill members. However, associates, tenants, landlord fees, all of those are billed at a point of sale. They're not billed as an account charge, all right? So think of it as like if you came up to the counter with a shirt, that's a point of sale charge, okay? That's something you're initiating as a customer, all right? That's how we bill those charges, or how we collect those charges. They're billed at the point of sale. We have no functionality within TEI to charge processing fees for any other type of transaction other than an invoiced or billed charge, which the only invoiced or billed charge that we currently do is to our members. Okay, so member dues. All right, so we do have the ability to charge processing fees for that, however, only on member dues. Okay.
Could I want to amplify something because Cliff and I have had discussions about this. When Cliff says member dues, that doesn't mean associates, that doesn't mean tenants, that does not mean landlord fees. Only member dues. So there's 3 other categories.
Right. Correct.
And when we think of member dues, at least when I think of member dues, I think of the whole rubric of that. It's not. It's just member dues. Okay. Thank you.
Correct, yep. So what are the capabilities that we would need development? So what would we have to invest in, or what are those capabilities that we would need to do to move forward with processing fees other than just charging members? Well, we need the ability to collect payment on the portal for member credit. So we have to give options to people. If we're going to charge a processing fee, we have to give them options, okay? So we need the ability to collect payment on the member portal for member credit. That's actually currently in development. We don't have to pay for that. They're working on that currently, okay? Which is great. We need the ability to charge processing fees at a point of sale. So for those tenant fees, for the landlord fees, if we decide to do it on guest fees, if we decide to do it on golf, whatever those point of sale charges are, merchandise, food and beverage, that has to be developed, the ability to do that. It doesn't currently exist, okay? The ability for rec centers, again, to charge all that, the different points of sales, the different divisions also, that needs to be developed, okay? And then on the portal, being able to charge a processing fee for if you charge your member credit with credit card versus ACH, okay? So currently we have no ability to pay for member credit on the portal. It's being developed, but we don't have the ability to do that. But once we get that ability, we need to be able to distinguish between how you paid for your member credit. So if you pay with eCheck or ACH, we don't charge you a processing fee. If we decide to charge a processing fee, if you pay with a credit card, we need that capability as well. okay? So there's a lot of, the point of this slide is to show there's a lot of development that needs to happen. If however we decide to move forward, whatever we decide, when I say we, you and the governing board decide to do with credit card fees, there's a lot of development that needs to take place. So if we're going to move forward with the development of these things, all right, if we're going to move forward with that, we have a recommendation coming from operations, okay? So our recommendation is, let's first get the ability for eCheck and ACH. Let's get that going, okay? And we're in the process of doing that. But we need that capability first, because we can't do this and not give people other options to pay, all right? So we want to get that going first. At the same time, let's let TEI complete their development on being able to use ACH for member credit. Because if we can do that, now members can still pay electronically at any point of sale with member credit, and they can charge it they can update it through the portal, maybe even auto update it. You know, once my member credit gets down under $100, add $100 to it from my bank account, whatever. Let's develop that, because that's the type of technology that's going to make our members' lives or experience much better. Okay, so let's develop those avenues and make sure those are working properly. And then once those are working properly, if we decide to move forward with charging processing fees in whatever area, whether it's just membership or membership in golf or whatever we decide to move forward there and invest the development in, let's scope that out. Budget that. Let's budget that. Okay, it's, we need this 50,000. Let's budget that to put that in the budget and move forward on that. And then when that gets completed, whatever time period that's in, the committee can make a recommendation to the board to move forward with charging processing fees at any point in time. It doesn't have to wait for a budget cycle. If we give people options, legitimate options, in whatever area we're going to do that, then that can be a recommendation, I believe, that can move forward to the governing board. But this is, again, there's going to be a process here, and this process moves us forward on what we need to do, but it's realistic on how we should roll it out. We need to be very intentional, very strategic about it, and give people options.
Thank you.
Yep.
I want to have discussion on this, but I first want to ask the committee if they have any questions for Cliff before we go into a discussion. Yes, Kelly, or Lynn?
With the eCheck, is that something that eventually, once that's all on board, that we might be allowed to use in clubs?
How so?
Well, in the case, some cases, some of our clubs are using Visa charges or Visa cards right now and have those charges. Is the eCheck going to be an option that we could set up our own account within the club to utilize that rather than credit card?
Oh, yeah, it wouldn't be linked to a bank account. So, yeah, I don't know. Katie, you coming up?
Cliff, I think that we're going farther than we want to go right now, because I don't think that we can answer that question. What I'd like to do is to try to focus on the major issues right now that we're dealing with, and that's the member credit, member dues. We don't know what we don't know, to be honest with you. We look at this, we've heard presentations. I think we've even heard one presentation twice, and we've heard presentation after presentation. And I think it's time for us to start making some informed recommendations. I don't think that I don't want to get bogged down with minutia, and I think that's what we've been doing. So, and Katie, do you have a quick answer for Lynn on the eCheck for the clubs?
Yeah, they are totally not integrated by design.
They are not integrated.
Yes.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Is that okay? Okay, I'm just wondering, because I know that you had said you need a bank. Well, we have a bank. We do business with Chase also. So I'm just wondering, knowing that we are hoping to go forward with that first and then later building on with the credit cards to make it affordable, and that would be much better for all. My question was just, I guess I'll ask you to just consider the clubs in your consideration, your work that you're doing towards this.
Just real quickly, it's a question, it's a policy question of whether you want the rec centers to collect membership dues for the clubs, run it through our bank accounts, disperse it, and handle the club memberships for 90-something clubs. We don't do any of that. It doesn't run through our bank. We have no plans to do that. So that's the question.
Yeah, and that wasn't the intent, so that gives me an answer. Thank you, no.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Do I have any other comments? David?
Nick, I have a comment, please.
Oh, okay, I've recognized David, and I'll recognize you after David.
So Cliff, how many member owners do we have? Roughly 28,000?
Yes.
That's the budget number you use?
Yes.
Okay, within that 28,000, does that include the associates and the tenants?
Yes.
So,
Well, not the tenants, the
okay,
associates.
so I'm trying to get back to what proportion, as Dick said, we'd like to come up with a solution that covers everybody. But right now, I'll be honest, I'm more interested in serving the needs of the member owners. Okay? So what's the proportion of associates and tenants and landlords as opposed to what I'll call the conventional member owners? 10%? 5%?
I'll have to get that back to you, but yeah, I'll have to get back to you on that.
Well, let's assume it's a small proportion.
It is.
Okay, so rather than take forever to try and come up with a solution to cover a small proportion, and ultimately we need to do that, I'd really like to move forward on a process to deal with the bulk, the vast majority of our member owners. And, you know, we've beat this topic just ad nauseum to death. And the reality is this is one of those problems where you have to look at what's right for the community as opposed to subgroups. Okay, there is no right or wrong answer on this. People want to use credit cards because they get points, they get cash back, okay? And that's important to some people. It's not important to others. Okay, so the real question in my mind is what's right for the community? And so, you know, the ACH, we started talking about this last year, and it always seems to me that it's 2 months. It's 2 months. So I really think we need to set a hard deadline to say, you guys have to have this implemented by a certain point in time. That's just my personal opinion. And if it takes diverting resources, you know, this wait till fiscal year 24, 25, I'm not supportive of that. I think if you have to, you divert resources this year from something that we had already budgeted for, and you apply it to fixing this problem, because it's something that people really care about. I think if you can put the ACH in, this fundamentally, it comes back to a choice, okay, as we have said multiple times. If people want to use a credit card because they want to get points and they want to get cash back, I think they should be charged a fee for that. If people can do the checks, the e-checks, or a paper check, or pay with cash, you've now given them a whole suite of options that they can go do. That's fundamentally what this is about. It's about choice. So again, I would really be supportive of getting the e-check system implemented as rapidly as possible, okay? Because if you do that and you do it for member credit, you now solve much of the credit card problems at the golf courses. I pay with member credit, okay? I go down and I put cash on a member credit account, and then I just flash my card at the golf course, okay? If you can do that by e-check, okay, fine. If people want to continue to pay long-term with credit card at the golf course because they want to get those rewards, I think they should be charged a fee for that. Now, that may not be a popular opinion with a lot of people, but the bottom line is you have a choice whether to pay with your member credit that you can now pay with an e-check, or you continue to use the card. Nothing is free in life. You pay for a convenience. The convenience is generating points or getting cash back. Thanks.
Okay. The only thing there, and certainly I'm not commenting on your opinion. I will comment on the time it takes to get this done. Okay? That is out of our control. All right? We don't instruct or direct the development team at TEI. Okay? So my four-step process is we're saying the same thing. Now, in terms of what you want to charge for or whatever, that's a decision, but that's built in that. So, but it does take time.
But you have a contractual relationship with this TEI company, correct? You're buying a service from them. If what they're telling you is they cannot provide the service that you need them to provide until X point in time, that's what you're saying.
This is new development. This isn't something we're currently paying for.
Oh, okay, but I'm saying if we now said to magically tomorrow, Cliff, you have $50,000 to go contract TEI.
Mhm.
Would they then come back and tell you, we will have this product ready for you by this date?
They've instructed us that it takes 6 months to develop what we're asking them to develop.
Okay.
Okay.
So if you started
So that's in
tomorrow,
the proposal.
if you started tomorrow, you would have this before the end of this fiscal year.
So if
An
I can
estimate.
respond. So eChecks was kind of vaguely talked to me at one point, but was really not on my radar. As soon as it was on my radar, I worked with TEI, I worked with Terry. It's gonna get done very soon. So that 2-month rolling, I can't speak to what happened before. It's on my radar. I've talked to them. We have a meeting tomorrow. You'll have it in 2 months. As far as this additional development, we'll do our normal process. They have a quarterly development schedule. We'll get the list of what we want, and it has to be very specific. And I want you to be very aware of unintended consequences. So when you say charge it for owner member dues, tenants and associates will essentially be paying less with a credit card. And you can have associates and owners in the same household. I can go online as an owner, pay for my spouse. They don't get surcharged and I do, if that's the way we go with the development. So I want to be very clear on what you want to surcharge and where you want to surcharge it and how you want to do that. Then I will go to them with a request. They will give me the price. Here's how much it'll cost. Here's when it'll be done. They'll look at their development schedule and they will look at their implementation schedule with ours, and then I'll have a date. But until that process happens, I don't get a date. That said, when they give me a quote and they give me a date, they're absolutely on target with those. Okay?
I think that when we look at last year, that we were extremely naive when we thought that we could proclaim that as of date X, we're going to start credit card fees. I don't think anybody's going to argue that point, and we'll be the first to say that. When you look at this process, when you look at all the moving pieces on this, it's very complex and very complicated. Our IT system was never developed, and it was never built to do this. It's not that it's inadequate. It's not that it's archaic. It just is different. That's not what we originally wanted to do. Now we're asking it to do some things that it's never been asked to do before, and we're learning how to do that. And that's why we're developing the ACH functionality. And we don't have the functionality right now, as I understand it, to actually collect a transaction fee from our members. Is that correct, Cliff?
Transaction fee, credit card transaction
Credit card
fee?
transaction fee.
Only on billed charges,
Only from
just to our members.
only from the members, but not from, as Katie said, not from the associates, tenants, and landlords.
Correct.
So
And
they're going to get off at a cheaper price.
Yeah, and as
So-
a point of clarification, the first year dues and the APF and the disclosure fee, that's not a bill, that's a point of sale payment, so it wouldn't include that.
Got it. So if we looked at this from a developmental incremental perspective, that we say, okay, we're going to look at this from now until the end of the fiscal year. and we're not going to charge, and this is hypothetical, so don't anyone say that I said we're not going to charge. This is a hypothetical what if. What if we said we're not going to charge any type of a transaction fee until we get the functionality developed that we can charge everyone or not charge everyone for the transaction fee? That we continue to develop ACH, eChecks, and we develop ACH for member credit, which really is almost the silver bullet, because we can use member credit. You could go down and put X number of dollars on member credit and then walk over and pay your dues with it. So the key here is processing, is to develop functionality for ACH. We don't know how everything else is going to fall out. So that's the part that we don't know what we really don't know. And we'll learn that as this continues to unfold. So I think that we're remiss unless we give you the go-ahead to move forward at full speed to develop ACH and to develop functionality for member credit through ACH.
Nick, could we have a discussion on these points
We have
rather
not.
than just giving direction?
That's what we're doing right now.
We're not. We're just giving direction. Can we please have a discussion?
We can. We're going to open it up.
Thank you, sir.
We're going to open it up right now. Dwayne?
Yeah, I have a question about, and this relates to actually trying to minimize the credit card fees that we've been experiencing. And I think last year was around 570,000. I have a question about that 570. How much of that was due to members paying their membership dues using a credit card? And once I hear that answer, I'd like to come back. Do we have that number?
There was about 300,000 that came from membership.
Okay. So if we were to not allow people to pay for membership dues with a credit card, but some other form, we would save 300 of the 570, which is almost balances out with what it would cost to implement this if we were to start charging 3%. So you could save 300 right there, and you'd be at a wash. Just a thought there for everybody.
Spagnano?
Thank you, Dick. When this topic first came up, it was easily a year ago, someone said to me that if we started charging a 3% fee on people paying their dues, then they were going to show up and pay their dues entirely in pennies. And I responded after doing a little bit of research, and I said, you know, $540 in pennies weighs about 275 pounds, and your bank's probably going to charge you $50 or maybe even $100 fee to give you all those pennies. So I suggest you think with your head rationally rather than just throwing things out there. As far as this slide, we don't need to go back to it with the increase in the yearly costs. No question in my mind, some of these costs will most definitely increase, but I think a lot of these figures are calculated on almost a worst-case scenario. I don't believe for a second, particularly at the golf course, that we're going to see a material increase in the amount of cash that people are bringing in. $100 greens fee with cart and maybe some beverages generates a $3 fee. I just don't think people are going to bat their eyes at paying a $3 fee. Even outside players, they're only going to be at, I'm going to roughly estimate, I don't know the figures, roughly between the greens fee and the cart fee in January, it's going to be about an $85 purchase with a credit card. And so I just don't think that they're going to bat an eye at spending 3% on top of the $85. The other question I have, and we want to implement the ability to pay our annual dues as an example via ACH, which essentially it's automated clearinghouse is what the acronym is. And that's essentially a direct debit to someone's checking or savings account, whichever account is chosen. So as a consumer, as an owner here, if I went on the website and I said, well, gosh, if I pay out of ACH, it's going to come right out of my bank account now. But if I pay with a credit card, and they're not charging me a fee, bingo, I get 2% cash back on a $1,080 fee because it covers 2 people in my home. Well, that's kind of a no-brainer for me. I'm taking the cash back all day long. And so where is the benefit to the community to allow people to pay via ACH when they're not going to be charged a penalty for using a credit card? And so I'm 100% in favor. Let's get this done. And if TEI comes back and says, look, it's going to take us 6 months, we're contractually obligated, here's the date we're going to deliver it, then let's get the process going. Thank you.
Other comments?
Yes, sir. When you have time?
Yes, Christine?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For all of us here, I just want to remind us that our role in this whole function is to talk about what we'd like, not how, because you can hear Katie and Cliff and all of the operations folks, they're so close to this. They know all the nuances and can advise us on all of the minutia of how. But I really want to suggest that we all take a step back and think about what it is we're recommending, and then allow our staff to go off and give us some ideas of how it would be best to implement this. This is what Cliff, we're showing the staff's recommendations. These are not the recommendations of us. They're not the recommendations of the owners, but they do reflect a consideration of the difficulties and so forth. So it's important for us to consider those. But however, we cannot allow us, in my opinion, to continue to be handcuffed by our current limitations. It may take a long time, as everyone is saying. It may take us a while to implement some of the things that we feel are best. But let's take a step back and talk about what we're trying to accomplish. A year or more ago, it was, let's chip away at these fees. One of the ways, it was very naive of us to recommend what we did, and I was all for it. But now that we have a closer view, it was naive, and we can step into this over time, perhaps. But let's talk about what we want to accomplish, what it is we're trying to do. I believe each of us are saying some of the same things, but we're just really down in the weeds, in the rug fuzz, if you will. Let's take a step back and say what we're trying to accomplish is reducing those fees to our credit card, for credit card processing. I believe that's what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is make sure we're providing an incentive. And what we're always trying to do is do the best. I hope I'm not misstating what Dr. Miller said, but we're trying to do the best for our fellow owner members. That's our first and primary concern. We're thinking of everyone, but especially the owner members, right? So what we're trying to accomplish is important here. How we accomplish it is what we do, and that's where our operations team comes in to give us the advice and counsel about how to implement. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
So on the what, from my perspective, I firmly believe that what we're trying to accomplish is in the best interests of our fellow owner members. And what we're trying to accomplish is more along the lines of to provide, let's start chipping away at those credit card processing fees, providing an alternative. So these are the recommendations that you see in 1 and 2. I thought we were loud and clear a year ago that the ACH, we expected ACH to be ready in a matter of months a year ago. That's okay. It wasn't clear. So if that's something we want to do, then we need to make a very clear, crisp recommendation to our operations team to go off and make that happen so that we can count on that as we implement our new fee structures for the next fiscal year. Because what we're doing right now, we're not going to change anything until next July, right? But this would give us an option to consider how we incent and what those fees would be for next year. So that's my belief, my recommendation. The what is let's get ACH processing available, number 1, number 2. For the rest of it, I really want us to talk as a group about what it is we're trying to accomplish. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any other comments? Mr. Donato?
All along, I've thought that what we're trying to accomplish here is whether or not we're going to impose a credit card fee on people who use credit cards to make transactions within the community, whether those transactions are for paying for member dues or paying for a beer at the golf course. It doesn't matter to me. It's whether or not yes or no. I'm a very black and white person, and we're either going to do this or we're not going to do this. If we do this, then we have the potential to wipe an $800,000 expense right off of our income statement, or at least a significant portion. In fact, I take that back. The entire $800,000 expense goes away because that's what people have been paying in credit cards all along. That's the amount that we're paying for the fees for the purpose of these people using credit cards. If we are then going to turn around and charge that fee back to the users of the credit cards, then we are more than covering the costs to implement this program going forward. So I kind of disagree with you, Christine. I think that what we're recommending here is yes or no. Do we want the community to begin imposing credit card fees?
Lynn?
I agree with both Frank and Christine in different ways. I believe that we most definitely need to go forward with the ACH fees as soon as possible, but I also believe that we need to get it on the budget, for the IT budget, to look forward into doing the credit cards. It's going to come down to a point where we really don't have much choice with the way things are evolving in the world today, and I think we're being naive, not taking a step forward now and budgeting for the work that needs to be done. Thank you.
Christine, do we have anyone online that has a question?
We do. I don't know if there's anyone in the room, but I can.
Yeah, we do. Let me go ahead and recognize him first. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
So I'm Chris Waller, 140558. So I don't mind using credit card. I actually get a little bit annoyed, like when I go to a restaurant and it's an extra $2 and something cents, right? Because I kind of like that benefit. So I'm torn. I'm a resident here. I want to save money on credit card fees, right? I'm a consumer. I like the idea that I could just throw out there and not have it pay $6 and not $6.42 for something, right? And I thought that Wayne Parson made a really nice recommendation that, in my mind, sounded, I don't know all the nuts and bolts, very simple. I know I can't use a credit card to buy a car, and it makes sense to me, right? Because that's a lot of added costs if you're going to buy a $40,000 car on a credit card. That makes sense to me. I get kind of annoyed when I get charged extra to buy a hot dog. So I don't know if the analysis was done, but what Dwayne was saying was, let's put a limit. Let's say $500 and higher, right? We can't accept a credit card. And the result with that would not be to keep our credit card fees the same, and it would not be to eliminate our credit card fees, but it would be to significantly reduce the credit card fees. So that's my point.
Starting to put your rec card number down
Yes,
there
yep,
for us,
good
please.
But by the way, that was a question that was asked. Is the goal, and I think Mr. Bagnato said this, is the goal to eliminate or to reduce? So that was my opinion.
Do we have anyone else in the room?
Okay, Jolene Pyaskowski. Can you hear me? It's like, okay, Jolene Pieskowski, 132268. I'm just asking, do we get charged by the swipe or do we get charged by the dollar amount, a percentage?
We get, every time there's a usage, so a swipe, it's a percentage of that swipe.
Right. So if I charge $500 or if I charge $2, it's a 3.5% of that charge, correct?
Roughly, it's a little less than
Right,
that,
I mean,
yes.
but it's not per swipe. I mean, it's per swipe, but a percentage of the swipe dollar amount.
Of the dollar amount, yes, per
Okay.
swipe.
So in the meantime, before we figure this all out, is there a possibility that we could just say anything over $50, you're going to have just a fee of $2 of a credit card fee until we figure this all out so we can chip a little bit away from that credit card fee? So, you know what I'm saying? I mean, and I would think Katie could just put a button on her system. Oh, you can't do that. Okay. Just, you know, because I'm
Okay,
just thinking.
Just for the record, Katie did respond to that, and I think her response was it was against state law.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
So you can't just do that.
No.
Because you know what I'm trying to say. I mean, you could just try to chip it a little bit as opposed to the whole chunk. Okay.
So we really do appreciate your comments on that. I think they're very interesting. I'm just not sure that we could do it. Okay. Mr. Bignato?
Yeah, I think that it needs to go on record. Jolene had just said a 3.5% fee. I used the figure of 3% for, but I think that it needs to go on record that there is no figure that has been established yet as the figure that's going to be used. We may be in the range of 2.5 to 3.5, but there's no set figure, and it's important that the community understands not to be extrapolating anything other than we're looking at this, but the fee has not yet been established.
Do we have any other comments or discussion from the committee? Are we in a position that we feel that we can make some type of a recommendation? You know, I think.
Dick, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we
Yes.
do have comments online, sir.
Oh, thank you. Okay, please. Proceed.
Jack Leary, membership number 128260, had two questions. I'm going to read them together to you, and you can decide how to broker those. Regarding Cliff's recommendation number 3, is it $50,000 to develop another customization for TEI? Second question is regarding Lynn's point. To Lynn's question, why not consider having club members use micropayment systems like Zelle? So two separate questions from 128260.
So first, I am going to defer that to Cliff.
Okay. The 50,000 is a rough estimate. We have to scope it out. We don't know exactly what we're asking them to do yet. And that's based on the recommendation that gets moved forward and voted on by the board. So we don't really know exactly what we want them to develop yet. Because we have the way we bill for things, even at the point of sale, is different by location. So it's not a simple, it's a very complex thing. So this all has to be developed and programmed, and we don't know how we want to move forward with it, so that'll determine what the cost will be. Katie's on her way up, but I'll answer what was the other thing about the clubs?
The question, I believe, had to do with using alternative payment methods, and I didn't recognize the names of the payments, but I'm assuming it's something like
Zelle and
Zelle.
yeah.
Exactly. The question, if I may repeat it, was why not consider having the clubs use micropayment systems like Zelle?
I don't know. Lynn, I don't know if you have a knowledge in that at all. I know that there's a charge to those, but I'm not sure what.
I don't have a lot of knowledge in it. I have used it, but it is something worth looking into.
We would look into it.
Yep.
Do you have any idea, Cliff, on the use of something like a Zelle or a?
Yeah, so I know, only speaking personally, my wife is the president of our high school baseball booster club. And they take payments through Square and through Zelle and through Venmo. And when you sign up for that, if you are a corporation or a business, you do pay a fee for that as well,
That's
even
right.
if you're a nonprofit. So there is a fee associated with that, but yes, it's a very simple thing to set up. And a lot of small businesses or small nonprofits use that.
Would our clubs,
And I'd like-
would our
I'd like to-
clubs be in the, have the latitude to do that?
Yeah, they would. Absolutely. It's tied to their bank accounts.
Right. If I may, one of the things that I heard Katie say, and I just want to amplify, what we're talking about here as a budget and finance, we're talking about the system totally that processes our payments. This is not the same system that the clubs use to process their payments. They're charging members for dues and other activities and using bank accounts that they set up individually. They do not process their payments through Sun City West's overall system today. And that would be a pretty massive policy change if I heard Katie correctly. So that's the reason why this is something that's at a club level and not really a consideration for us, and if I heard that correctly.
Katie, do you have a brief comment?
Yeah, just briefly on number 3, on the cost of the development, until we know, like Cliff said, what we're asking for, I would love to have a small working group give us that direction. There's so much in the weeds that we're not going to go into now with owners, associates, how they're different, late fees versus a regular POS payment. So I don't even at this point know what I'm asking the developers to develop.
Okay.
That would be helpful.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have one more person in the audience. Okay.
Jolene Paskowski, 13226. To Lynn's comment, Lynn, I belong to 2 clubs and we just started taking Zelle. And there's, as far as I can tell, there's no charge for our clubs to be using Zelle. Just a FYI.
Okay, that's something that have to be explored. Okay,
Yeah, they can do it themselves, but
thank you, yeah.
It depends on how you set it up. If you set it to a personal bank account, then no, there is no fee. But if you set up to a business account, there is a fee.
oh.
Okay, so do we have any other comments? Okay, yes, Dwayne.
Yeah, Dick. You asked, are we ready to take a vote here or not? I think I'd like to just go through these recommendations real quick. I agree with all of these, but one thing I would like to add, and was what I talked about earlier, is, you know, what can we do to really minimize this audit control, cost that we're incurring here? And I'd like to go back and say, I'd like to see us add something like, we can't take credit cards anymore, and we could start this immediately for member dues, and then that just got rid of half of our problem right away. So just, if we're gonna give recommendations, that's one of mine I'd like to add.
I think what we're going to do, we've been at this for almost 2.5 hours, and we still have this item and one more that I really want to get through. So I'm going to ask for a 5-minute bio break, come back, and we're going to start the discussion immediately on completing our discussion on credit card, and should we come to a point that we have a recommendation, I'd like to proceed with that as well. Okay, so as of right now, 5 minutes, and be right back, please. We're going to reconvene. One of the benefits of having a bio break, other than the bio break, is that you have the ability to kind of rethink what we need to do and to where we are. And I'm just going to start, I'm going to offer comments just to kind of start this off. What this really boils down to is, do we want to charge a processing fee or do we not want to charge one? That's really the basis for the recommendation. Because if we don't want to charge one, then we go back to business as usual. We're going to incorporate the cost of transactions into our budget, but that's where we were 6 months ago. Today, we've rethought this. We understand the complexities of technology, and to put this in other words, and I don't want to make this sound flip. Please don't accept it as that. We can't bog ourselves down right now with the minutia of functionality. That is going to be absolutely critical as we progress in this. If we decide that we want to make a recommendation to the governing board that we do want to charge a transaction fee. But that's the first thing that we have to decide. So I open it up, and those are simply my editorial comments, and I open it up for discussion.
Dick, may I go first?
You don't have to agree with me.
Well, Dick,
David?
Can I be recognized? I think Frank succinctly put it a while ago, and it's a yes or no. Okay? And so we voted multiple times on yes or no last year, and the governing board then took our recommendation and made their decision. Okay, so I'm kind of back to, we can do another vote, we can make more recommendations. The governing board will again decide whether they want to follow our recommendation or not. So it seems to me that this is a pretty straightforward up-down vote. Let's say yes or no.
Mr. Bignato?
Given the amount of conversation we've had about this topic today, I also think that it behooves every member of the governing board to at least watch this portion of today's meeting so they get an understanding fully of whether or not they will also agree with what this committee decides to do.
Thank you. Mr. Bosak?
My view is we support the recommendation that has been provided to us with the caveat that the 50,000, Katie doesn't know what the scope of the project is going to be. It's kind of like the Carl Wilhelm project. Here's 50 grand to get started to do a project, and it's got to go out and get estimates, get the scope of the work done. Once I get all that, I'll have a firm number, but until I start that, I have no idea what we're getting into. My preference would be just to support exactly what's here on paper.
Dwayne?
Yeah, Dick, I guess I kind of disagree that it's just black and white or it's yes or no. I think there's other ways to skin the cat here to minimize the impacts, and we should be looking at more than just a yes or no type of recommendation. But
Kelly?
I think there are two issues that we need to look at, and one is the recommendation we've been given for the ACH work being done. I think that we definitely need to acknowledge yes or no on that. And I think the other issue still remains in our lap of the credit card charges, and I think we need to do a yes or no vote on that as well.
Mr. Miller?
Yeah, Dwayne, in response to your comment, I think what you just suggested we do is literally what we have been doing for almost a year now in terms of trying to talk through what our options and alternatives are. But fundamentally, you know, it comes down to, in my mind, the community, however we choose to do this, whether we impose a fee or whether we absorb it as a cost of doing business, the community is still paying a credit card fee. It's a question of simply what's the best way for us to implement that and make it as simple for the community as we possibly can. But fundamentally, you're still paying the fee. And people need to not lose sight of the fact that this is not free. And, you know, I think some people go, oh, well, you know, this is not gonna end up costing me anything. That's not correct. So we can continue to wrangle about, well, how do we nibble away with this? And, you know, Gary and I were sitting here going, I don't have problems with these recommendations. And, you know, and Gary and I talked about the fact that, yeah, the 50K needs to get pinned down. But fundamentally, you know, we need to decide, do we want to do these fees or not? And then we can move forward. Until we make that decision, we're kind of spinning our wheels again. So, in my opinion, so.
Christine, I can't see you, but I presume you may have a question?
I do.
Or comment?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. This is a challenge. And then, again, I encourage us to step back and think about what, not how, but what. My abiding opinion is that we as a community have underinvested in technology. We are seeing the fact that we have very limited options right now at our hands to implement the things that we'd like to do. However, so that being said, I would like us as a committee and as an overall community to have the opportunity to make the choice, right? Whether it's the right choice or the wrong choice, whether it's a good philosophy, you know, what will we be? Are we driving people toward the use of more cash, et cetera? These are important strategic considerations, but we have no choice right now. We could not implement this recommendation that we made a year ago because we've underinvested in technology systemically over a period of years. So that's my concern on options 3 and 4. Are we putting money where it should not be? Should we take a step back rather and think about a better way to implement? I don't know. But I do think I agree with many of the comments I'm hearing that we need to make a recommendation on the what, not and I would hesitate on recommending personally. I would hesitate on recommending spending another $1 on implementing numbers 3 and 4 until we really have a better handle on what it is we'd like to do and what our other options may be. That's my viewpoint.
Yeah, Mr. Davies?
I've stayed pretty quiet about this whole process, just taking in all the information and all the views because that's the kind of guy that I am. But I pay my member dues with a credit card, not because I'm getting 2.5% back, but because I can do it online and not be bothered. And I think until we offer easy online solutions for paying our dues, we're falling short of what we should be doing. Secondly, I agree that we should charge a fee for the credit cards.
Mr. Bernardo?
Thank you, Dick. Something that hasn't been brought up in this conversation yet today is that everyone in this community who pays for something is already being assessed a credit card fee. It's built into the cost of what we pay. Exactly what that figure is remains to be seen, but if we were to go ahead and implement charging a credit card fee, then suddenly the need for, say, a $50 dues increase next year is reduced by the amount of the savings that the community will receive by not having that $800,000 noose around our head. If you use just 3% as an example, $540 worth of your dues comes out to about $16 or $17. And so suddenly the increase that has to go into effect for next year can be tempered somewhat, not only on the dues, but particularly on golf greens fees as well. In other words, we're mitigating the amount of increase that might need to go in by making people pay the cost of using those credit cards. And I hope that makes sense.
And if I may, I'm sorry that
Yes,
I'm
no, please.
interrupting, but it's also a matter, I think over the course of the past, while we've been together as well as last year, there's a bit of a carrot and a stick. Do we want to offer an incentive, effectively a discount for paying in another way, right? Or do we want to impose a fee? In other words, it's all about how we want the visibility and how we want to do this. It's about what we want to do, right? And accomplish those same goals of reducing the fees that we are incurring, incenting us as owner members to, if you will, do the right thing versus, hamstringing some folks who come to the golf course and or whatever. They want the convenience of paying. I think we want to implement choice. I'm not sure, but if that's what we're talking about, it's really just a matter of figuring out, is it a matter of offering an incentive and educating people on all of us on the opportunities of using member credit and assuming we can add to member credit and use member credit. That's a unique benefit, if you will, to the folks who are owner members, our fellow owner members. If we can figure out a way to implement this as an incentive, it's only that, if you will, discount is only available to people who are owner members who use member credit. It's just wanted to get that thought out too. How we do it, again, we can think about that, but I believe what I've always been hearing is we wanted to charge the fee so that we could chip away at that big bill that we pay every year. It's either that or we continue to bake that cost into our cost of doing business across the board. Thank you.
Well, I would say that if we charged a transaction fee, that would crystallize those dollars, and they would no longer be, we could see the effect from our budget, because we would be able to tease that information out. We're still at a point that we really need to come to some level of closure with a recommendation. I think that we're still at a point, and I want to go back to the very basics here. And the basics is, in spite of the fact, David, that the committee did vote last year to charge or to assess a transaction fee, and the governing board overruled that. That's certainly within their prerogative. But I think that we need to come back with another recommendation. Is this do we want to charge or assess a transaction fee for the use of credit card, or do we not want to do that? And I think that'll put us on the right path. Christine, I think you're dead on when you talk about our IT infrastructure. I think it's been underfunded. I think that it's not, again, I want to say that it's not wrong. It's just that's the way it was built. And we have to work towards moving it to be more nimble and more responsive to us being able to make some of these informed decisions of things like transaction fees. So
there are some more comments on YouTube as well before we actually vote or make a recommendation as a committee.
Yeah, let's go ahead, and we'd like to. I think we've heard all the comments in here, so let's go ahead and hear the YouTube comments.
Okay, they are all continuing to be from Jack Leary 128260. So is this a Sun City West specific customization, or are we asking for TEI to develop the feature into their product for all customers?
Okay, read the next one. Katie's coming down to respond to
Okay. There may be some others that Katie would address too. So the other is to me, Christine, a suggestion. Cliff presented operations recommendations for the credit card fee discussion. The suggestion is that a full discussion be added to a subsequent B&F meeting to allow members to give it thought rather than try to do it off the cuff today. There needs to be a more thought-provoking discussion on Cliff's recommendations and to agree on the problem that B&F is trying to solve. They don't seem to be in sync on what the problem is. Therefore, the answer cannot be developed.
I'm not sure what I can say about that other than we have differing opinions, we have differing approaches. I think that's what we're trying to do, is to elicit feedback, and that's why we have we're inviting those on YouTube to participate, and also the people in the room today. So you know, that's exactly what we're trying to do, is to have a thoughtful discussion, thoughtful, transparent discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to read those it would, the last comment made was, if we customize TEI again, we lock ourselves into a legacy system with tons of technology debt.
Katie, do you have you want to respond to the initial question?
Yeah, so to Mr. Leary's question, is it for Sun City West only, or are there other clients? Credit card surcharging in Arizona has only been legal for a couple of years. They have many, many clients, but nobody else has requested this. In to surcharge on the invoice that exists already. So it would be done, what they have now for the invoicing would be modified for us, but there's no other community that does a per person property assessment. So that portion would have to be customized for us because nobody else bills that way, to answer that question. Secondly, there's a lot of talk about legacy systems, the system being limited. There is no off-the-shelf software that works for any community like ours. And we can build one from scratch, but it would take 5 years to get to where we are today with TEI. TEI will customize anything that we want. If you tell me how you want these to be surcharged, they will develop it. But you have to understand the complexity and how the different items are billed, whether a point of sale item or a bill per household. Can you pay for you and your spouse on the portal, considering you have 2 separate accounts there? That was married together again for us. So all of those questions need to be answered. And if we want to go out and buy a new solution tomorrow, I'm fine with that, but all of that same customization will have to happen, or we'll have to fundamentally change how and who Sun City West is in terms of our billing and the per property.
Thank you. Okay, I want to open this back up to the committee. You know, are we in a position that we want to offer any type of a recommendation? We've been wrestling with this for a long time.
I'd like to recommend that we move forward to implement the eCheck ACH payment capability as soon as possible and receive updates every meeting on the progress of that initiative.
Okay. Do we have discussion on that? Mr. Booth?
Thank you, Dick. Are we not already engaged in getting the AC? I'm getting a head nod in the right direction from Katie. So why would we recommend moving forward with the ACH when it's already being moved forward?
Frank, my recommendation is based on the fact that we've been asking for this for over a year, and it's still. And Katie indicated that she only heard about it very recently. If not today, then perhaps a week or 2 ago. So I just want us to go on record as a committee that this is something that's important to us, so we can receive updates on the progress. And that's all. So I just wanted to sort of break our discussion apart into those 2 components.
It formalizes it. Okay. Any other comments? I would like to suggest that we add to that the ACH to work on the portal for member credit.
Yes, effectively, Dick, would that be recommendations 1 or 2? 1 and 2?
That'd be 1 and 2. Yep.
To be clear, the number 2, we don't have that capability. It is being developed, but we don't have it yet.
It's under development.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
And then, but our job is to help give you direction. Okay. But so what do we need to do to,
I'm just clarifying it. That's it.
okay.
Thanks.
We could probably use the same premise that we'd like to have a monthly update on that. And this is not something we're going to solve today. You know, if we can take a bite out of this apple and keep coming back and get more information as this progresses, I think it might unfold a little more clearly for us. So, Christine, would you frame your recommendation for us so we can deal with it?
I'll attempt to.
Okay.
I recommend, is it a motion, by the way? Do
Well,
I make a motion for this?
we're going to find out.
Okay. I recommend that we, I can't read everything in print. I don't have it in front of me, but I recommend that we move forward on operations recommendations 1 and 2. Oh, thank you very much. So I recommend that we get ACH working on the portal for dues payments and get ACH working on the portal for member credit, and receive updates at every meeting about the progress on that.
Yeah, and this is going to be our recommendation to the governing board, and the governing board will have the right to act on that. And do we want to add to that we want monthly progress reports?
I believe my recommendation is, as I read both of those and said, and that we receive an update at every meeting.
Okay, thank you. I
On the
missed that.
progress.
Yeah, Mr. Bosak?
I could be sitting in the left field bleachers, but it seems to me that we're asking for us to approve a recommendation to the governing board on something that's already happening. Is that not true?
We are formalizing something that we have been told has been in the works for over a year. We're just putting it on the books with my recommendation. And then we can move on and tackle the second 2, right? But I want us to go on record, Gary, that we've recommended that we want this to happen. We see a big benefit toward this. And the operations team has been working diligently, we thought, to implement that. This just crystallizes it and enables the governing board and this committee to receive regular updates on the progress of our recommendations. I heard today, we all heard, that it was news to Katie. Like, she was not aware that this is something that we had recommended a year ago. So just making it clear so that she can then manage this process to conclusion with our vendor.
Mr. Magnato?
Thank you, Dick. Again, I don't see why we need to make a recommendation to anyone to continue doing something that they're already doing. I'm lost here. I mean, they're working on this now, and so getting a monthly or every meeting update on when it might be concluded, that's all well and good. But why would we recommend to the board that they then recommend to administration to go ahead and do something that they were already doing, which is getting the ACH capability built into our system? So I'm sorry, Christine, I disagree, but I think
that's fine.
It's not the direction we need to go. At this point, I recommend we take a yes or no vote on whether or not to implement credit card fees in an appropriate amount to every transaction in the community, regardless of where it comes from.
Dick?
Miller?
Christine's made a motion. I think before we move to Frank, we should vote on Christine's motion.
Okay. Do we have a second on her motion?
Second.
So you will be, if you vote yes, you will be voting in support of the motion that we move forward with a recommendation on 1 and 2 to proceed with the ACH development for members and for member credit. If you vote no, that will not support it. Okay, and we're going to start with you, Dwayne.
I vote yes.
No?
No.
David?
No.
No.
Yes.
Okay, we have a 2 to 5, no. Oh, Christine, I'm sorry. Christine.
I vote yes.
Good. So we
So
have
it's 3 to 5.
3 to 5. Actually, we have, I didn't vote. I don't vote on this. It's 4-3. No. Okay, Mr. Bignato, you had one that you wanted to discuss?
No discussion. I'm simply making a recommendation
Okay.
that we take a vote now on whether
Okay.
or not to implement.
Would you
the fee.
rephrase that for us, please?
I recommend that we ask the board to go ahead and accept moving forward with imposing a credit card transaction fee across the board for every purchase made in Sun City West.
Okay. We're going to start with Lynn Kellis.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
Mr. Bose?
Yes.
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 Yes?
Yes.
Okay, the vote's unanimous. Christine?
May I ask a quick question of Frank before I vote?
Yes.
Frank, does your recommendation include the expenditure of any dollars at all?
Of course.
Could you please amend that so that we know how much money we're authorizing or we're recommending, excuse me. I don't know if anybody else needed to hear that, but how much money are we authorizing operations to expend on this?
I'm looking at the slide and they're asking for $50,000.
Then I vote no.
Did everyone understand that there was a proviso for $50,000 on here with this vote? Let's go down the line. Did you understand that?
Yes.
Yes. Did you understand that?
Yes.
Did you understand that? Okay, so I'd like to have you, Frank, would you reframe that recommendation? Because Christine didn't understand it. Actually, neither did I, but.
Before I make the recommendation, I look at item 3 in the recommendation and it says to budget it in fiscal year 24-25. I don't see why the $50,000 can't be taken from the fund that we established for the what-ifs. Just like we took money to fix a well pump at the golf course, this is just $50,000 that will come out of our contingencies. Rather than waiting until the next fiscal year, which just keeps kicking the can further down the road. So I recommend that we move forward with a yes or no vote, which will include using the contingency fund to cover the initial costs of software development in terms of imposing a 3%, or I'm sorry, imposing a credit card fee on the community per transaction.
Could we have some discussion on this? Because my sense here, when we start tying dollars to this, because we had originally talked about, this is a yes or no vote, are we going to have credit card transaction fees or not? So that's the limit of what I see. Now, that's my opinion, and I don't vote unless there's a tie here, so take it for what it's worth. Yeah. Yes, Cliff? Yeah.
I just want to give a little more clarity to the recommendation from us. The timing of it First of all, the dollar amount, we don't know exactly we don't know until we scope it out. So I just wanted to put a dollar amount in there, but because we know it's going to cost. There's a cost there. That being said, timing wise, the reason for next year's budget wasn't simply just because of the dollar amount. It's just the time that it takes to implement and see the impacts of step 1 and 2 on the community and what the usage is, so we could have a better, more knowledge and more information to assess how we want to move forward with number 3. So that was, timing wise, that's why I had that in the budget for next year. So let's get up and going on this ACH stuff. Let's see how the community is using it on their own without a stick or a carrot, and see what the impacts of that are, so that we have more information to be able to make a decision, so that you would have more information to make a decision on how we want to implement a processing fee, and that then will drive what the development is and what the cost is. So that's why I had that kind of in that order and that timeline.
The $50,000 was associated with the development of the ACH, and we voted against that.
No. The 50,000 is the development of the processing, the transaction fee. That's what that 50,000 is for. Okay? So steps 1 and 2 are currently paid for in terms of the development, or it's being developed and we're not driving that. TEI is developing that. Step number 2.
Would you normally, if you had this type of a recommendation, and I'm talking procedural now, you would do a facts and findings on this once you made the assessment of what the value was?
Oh, we would get the scope of what's being
Right.
requested. We would present that to TEI. They would say how much time and what the cost of that would be. We would package that all up in a presentation. Here's what's being recommended. Here's the cost of that.
And wouldn't that be a more informed way to do that than just arbitrarily assigning $50,000?
Agreed. It would be. We do have an allowance for such things, but in terms of a more specific amount for specifically what, it would be a better way to do it. Again, I still feel like on the recommendation from operations, step 1 and 2 are critical in understanding how that's going to work and how we're going to roll that out and who's going to use it and then help us determine then how we move forward with whatever development needs to be done or whatever costs associated with that. So, and it doesn't need to wait till 24, 25. If we know all that, if we get it up and going and we use it for 3 months and it's April and we know that, hey, we're ready to construct a plan and execute something, we could do it then.
We have a recommendation on the table that has been approved by all 6-1 that we should go ahead and proceed with a recommendation to the governing board that we charge a transaction fee. Now, anything over and above that is what we're dealing with right now.
Yeah. So
Okay. But there's been an amendment to that we add a dollar value to it.
I only, and if I may,
Please, yes.
Director Rhodes, I only voted the way I did because of the dollar values associated with our recommendation. I just wanted to say to my fellow committee members and anybody listening that I believe, I do agree with the concept that we should have the choice, the opportunity to include this in some way. I do believe that there's a choice. I do not believe we know enough about the option that's presented to know that we have a good estimate of cost, nor do we know yet that it's the right way to implement that. But that's the reason why I was trying to pull those suggestions apart, Mr. Bagnato. But if it included the expenditure of dollars, I personally believed it was premature to do that, which is why I voted in the way that I did. So just so that you all understand.
And therein lies the reason. I agree with you, Christine. There lies the reason why I would defer to a facts and findings document where you had actually analyzed it and said, okay, this is the level, this is the amount, this is the cost that we need for this. And is there value there? So I'm a little, personally, I think that this is an arbitrary number, at least for our recommendation. And I would, my preference, and again, this is my opinion only, and I don't vote. My preference would be we proceed with the recommendation that we've identified in an unmodified way, that we don't attach a dollar value to it, and then we'll have the assumption that we'll have the knowledge that once you get that, you're going to do your own deliberations on it, you'll do a facts and findings, and we'll be able then to listen to that and have an idea of what the value is going to be. Mr. Magnato?
Again, I'll go back to something that I said earlier, and this addresses what Cliff said about gauging the level of use of being able to pay by ACH. That's wonderful, but one thing that I think is being ignored here is that we may be old, but we're also pretty savvy. And so if I go online to pay my annual dues and I'm given two choices, one is an ACH, which goes direct to my bank account, costs me nothing, or I can use my credit card and get 2% cash back. Duh, I'm going with the credit card every time. Unless there's an incentive for people to move away from using their credit cards by making ACH transactions, then people are going to continue doing what they did before. As far as paying the small fee, when people go to play golf and stuff, I think that for the most part, there will be people that will complain, but they'll get used to it. Change is not always easy.
It's 12:05. We have been here for 3 hours, and we're not done. And I think that unless we can come to some closure within the next 3 minutes, I think we're going to adjourn this meeting. I'm not sure what to say, other than we have some very powerful opinions, but we need to come to closure. We need to move somewhere, at least to get closer to what we want to do. And every time I think we're close to getting there, we seem to go to a different direction. And I don't know.
We did have a vote, though, just to be
We do
fair.
have a vote. We do have a vote. We do have a vote. It's been modified. Well, actually, the vote was not modified. It was not modified. And if you want to make a modified, so I don't know procedurally, once we have to amend the motion. We have to amend the motion. We have to amend that. You have to amend it to, you have to make a motion to amend it, and then we'll make another one go ahead.
I'd like to amend the motion to remove any references to dollar amounts that were made in the original recommendation.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Do we have a discussion? Okay, let's go ahead. Let's do a roll.
Dick,
Yeah.
when you present this to the governing board, the first question you're going to get asked is, how much is this going to cost? And what you're only going to be able to say if we take some kind of dollar amount out is, we have yet to determine what that is.
I understand that.
But we have a $50,000 estimate as a get started kind of support. And if we're spending $50,000 to make hundreds of thousands, it's got to be viewed as a reasonable investment.
Mr. Schwinn?
After hearing the recommendation from Mr. Bagnato moving forward, I think staff is ready to take this ball and run. And with your recommendation moving forward to the governing board, by the time the governing board meets, I think, Katie, if we're looking at an across-the-board credit card fee, as per what I believe I heard as far as the motion goes, Katie will have a quote by then. So the governing board, at that point, moving forward with a recommendation back to us, should have a number in front of them.
Thank you. Okay, restate. We want to wrap this up. Frank, would you restate your amendment?
Well, do we have a motion to amend anymore? I mean, there was already a motion that was, that succeeded by 6-1. We did not read out any of the member comments from online, and I don't know if there are any in the room, but we do have a vote already, don't we? I don't know if we need a motion to amend. It's up
We
to
did have a
Frank.
vote, and I thought we did read out all of the member comments, or from online.
We can read them at the end of the meeting or now, but we've already voted, so I don't think that they apply.
Okay, let's.
I don't know about that. You can tell me, Dick.
Okay, so I believe we have voted on this. So this will go to the governing board. Okay, let's just, I know this is going to be painful, but let's recap that, that recommendation. And it was that we forward a recommendation to the governing board that we assess transaction fees. CC transaction fees, okay.
The microphones in the room are not working for those of us who are online.
Okay, I'm sorry. I've turned mine off right now so I can finish writing this. Okay, so that was a 6-1. Christine, do you still vote no on that particular?
I do.
Okay.
My vote stands.
Thank you. Good. All right, at that. So we'll have that. We'll go forward to the governing board. Okay. We have one other item on our agenda that we are not going to deal with today due to the hour. Okay, and it has been moved at least twice, and it will be moved again. And if anybody wants to, no. So we will get, that has to do with Family Pass. We're not going to deal with it today. It'll be moved to a subsequent meeting. So I'm going to ask for committee comments. We have none. Okay. Any guest comments?
Yes, there were comments that came in around the time that we were taking the vote. So
Okay,
I will read these
it's
out.
time to hear those. Let's hear those.
Again, it's Jack, I don't know if there are any in the room, but this is Jack Leary, same membership number. I object to this consensus. I'm just going to read it as it stands. I object to
Okay.
this consensus. The contingency budget items are not an account from which to draw funds for new items. Contingency funds are to handle overages when a project goes over budget due to unexpected additional costs. We won't get a full system for $50,000. That money is being included to develop requirements in the development budget. Those are the comments.
And the only comment I'd have with that is we agree with him. We understand that, and that's why we have removed that the dollar value.
No, we did not. If I may, the original motion was inclusive of dollars. That's what everybody voted on and agreed to.
It was not. It was not. That didn't come until after we had the vote. And I believe Mr. Bagnato surfaced that. So does anyone recall differently? We have, yeah. We have, yeah. So, okay. Do we have any other comments from the YouTube, Christine?
I do not see any further comments.
All righty, thank you very much. All right, our next meeting is going to be November the 7th. We will forward the item 3.07. I'm not sure if it will make the November 7th meeting, but we will not lose that. We will continue to bring that forward until we can get some time for resolution on it. Okay, it is 12:13, and we will adjourn this meeting. Thank you.